Stop doing this. The secret toxicity hiding in your most wholesome moments. Oh, look at this adorable 4-year-old using a walker. So inspirational. Oh, this guy asked a deaf girl to prom. Watch this group of guys play tackle football with a guy with Down syndrome. Check out this amazing blind kid walking down a street. Next level, yo! As a disabled person, it gets really weird when you grow out of that cute stage. It's like people think you're meant to grow out of being disabled. I mean, we're getting better about it, but for a long time it felt like most help stopped at 18. Everything was geared towards people in their 70s or 80s. I'm visually impaired, so most people like me will be older, but still. Using your child for likes on social media. That's creepy. I never understood why any parent would do that. All of those fake animal rescue videos on YouTube. I once saw one where the person put baby ducks inside oil in which the ducklings were all covered with it and they couldn't move. And then she, quote, rescued those ducks. Shame. The worst one I saw was the one where they threw a sweet family pet dog or a stray dog into a drum of tar to, quote, rescue it. Just so evil to do that to a poor animal just to get a recording of it. You can tell it was deliberately done because they make sure to record the poor animal before even attempting to rescue. As if to say the video was the most important part of the entire incident. It's just a blatant marketing ploy. Spending so much time on social media to show everyone else how wholesome your life is. I quit IG and Facebook, and now when I see people in person, they assume something's gone terribly wrong in my life. News stories like CEO sees employee dumpster diving for food, so buys them a headlamp. Or kid works manual labor to pay off school lunch debt for entire class. The first one actually sounds like an Onion article. People that tell you, you won't fail. Look, I get what they're trying to say, but there's a certain point where I just want to hear, it's okay if you do fail. How haven't most of us realized by now that failure is one of the greatest teachers? Are there still inspogrammers who are still just touting mindless toxic positivity and that everything will work out? Gross. I thought we got past that like a decade ago. Corporations who spend $50 million on ads to tell you about the amazing $1 million that they spent on a charity program. Frickin' Bell Let's Talk is the worst. Canadian here. And there's the whole month and people get on social media and talk about their mental health. I appreciate that there's a goal to destigmatize mental health in our communities, and I think it's worked up to a point. But every time you use the hashtag "we'll donate 5 cents to, quote, mental health association," just makes me angry. You're a multi-billion-dollar company and your rates are outrageous. F off with the disingenuous feel-good bullcrap advertising. Take $5 from every person's monthly phone bill and donate that if you care so much. Social media posts of people sharing their good deeds or acts of kindness, especially when it's some annoying, elaborate thing that completely ignores existing social supports, like collecting and then handing out food donations instead of, regularly supporting the food bank. Or they just give money to a poor person and then force that person to pose with them. Or worse, they film them. Good people don't talk about how good they are. Something I remember was from a guy during the atrocities of the Third Reich who saved Jewish people, who said to the effect of, seeking reward for helping people in need is just profiting off of someone else's suffering. And for the life of me, I can't find who said it. I just know it generally, and it's so true. Family vlogging. I don't know how they get the guts to film in public like that. I think the first part is to literally not care about anyone besides yourself. After that, imposing on strangers around you and exploiting your own family becomes way easier. Similar situation. She does have a young child and vlogs everything about him. I was thinking about this earlier. There's a girl I follow who vlogs literally everything, and I mean each to their own, but it was her bachelorette weekend and she posted, "What a fun weekend, I can't wait for you to see the vlog." And I'm like, you literally can't put the camera down for one frickin' weekend? Teachers working overtime and sacrificing for their students or fundraising for anything. Most news articles that hit national headlines about teachers are toxic as F. Student raises money for his former teacher found living in their car. Or principal works second job to help homeless students have clean clothes and food. Yes, this. I taught in the inner city and it was expected that your entire life was the school. My friends watched that Hilary Swank movie about her teaching in the city and told me it was so inspirational and I should watch it. It was actually one of the reasons I left the city. She gave up on everything for a job, worked 3 jobs to afford it, lost her marriage. Like, no, that is not wholesome at all. Any viral story about some poor kid selling stuff to pay for a relative's healthcare. It shouldn't be a thing. I just read a story about a child the age of 10 having to pay for her chemo via a lemonade stand. Instagram influencers promoting their amazing healthy lifestyles, but in reality mostly staged and photoshopped and exacerbating mental illness, body issues, and anxiety in young people. The expectation to keep your family members in your life no matter what they do. Some people have families that treat them like absolute crap, and being related to them isn't a good reason to keep them around. It's okay to cut off toxic family members. You only have one family. Yes, Carol, I know that. I'd have traded them for a different one if you've got multiple choices. Life is too short to not talk to your family. Yeah, thanks, Roger. You know what? Life is also too short to be made miserable by them. Beauty pageants. Or, even worse, child beauty pageants. What? Are you suggesting that small girls shouldn't be presented in front of adults in full makeup and provocative dresses to be judged based on their beauty and talents? How dare you! The martyr mum idea that you have to sacrifice 100% of your life for your kids. Absolutely, parenting takes sacrifices, but I've seen some people act like they can't do anything for themselves anymore because they have children. For example, a woman I work with ended up with a half day at work while her kids were at school, so she had 3 to 4 hours of unexpected free time. I suggested she get a mani-pedi or something else fun just for her, and she told me, "Oh, I could never do that. I have kids." Lady, your kids are safely at school and this is found time. It doesn't make you a better parent to neglect yourself, especially when it isn't even necessary. You don't have to be a throw-up-covered, unshowered, and unhappy person to be a good parent. A few people have suggested that it might just be about the cost of their mani-pedi. This was just an example of one of my suggestions. She literally told me she couldn't do anything for herself because of the kids, not even watching a free movie or going for a walk, despite having an extra half day of time. It's really a toxic spectrum with this on one end and mommy wine culture on the other. Like you're either a robot who only exists to serve your family, or you're a functioning alcoholic who can't wait to get the F away from your kids so you can get hammered. Apparently, there is no in-between. Asking your child, who's your boy or girlfriend, anytime they interact with someone of the opposite gender. My parents did this when I was a teen, which just embarrassed me. I had a group of female friends, but I wasn't close with any of them. We just stuck together like a pack of socially awkward teenagers. I got on much better with my male friends, not sure why, I just did. Embarrassing me about interacting with the boys just started a spiral of lies to hide who I was actually meeting up with. In fact, I recall when choosing secondary schools, my parents initially wanted to send me to an all-girls school out of town because they'd both gone to that sort of school. I wanted to go to our local co-ed school because I thought it was dumb to avoid interacting with half of society. I remember my mum asking me why I wanted to go to a co-ed school and teasing me and hinting that maybe it was because I liked boys. It was so embarrassing. Hustle culture. What? You aren't grinding yourself into a fine red paste at your job? Coming in early, leaving late, working weekends, and paying for your own training? What do you mean you don't have a side hustle and passive incomes? Are you even trying? Haven't found your purpose or started a business yet? What are you even doing? Ugh. 6 years of working in car sales ground me into a nub. I used to enjoy talking to people and meeting new people. Then there was 6 years of 65 to 75-hour weeks, being looked at funny for taking days off or leaving at my scheduled time, and having to talk to so many people. I actively avoid having to be in situations like that. Luckily, I have a job now where I work about 40 hours a week and I actually get to enjoy my family and don't dread going to work. Screw hustle culture. Very glad that I seem to more or less get by on 40 hours as it stands. But yeah, I do wonder if working 70-hour weeks in my 20s might have removed some of my sparkle permanently. Or maybe that's just my age, who knows. Crowdfunding for medical costs, or kids having lemonade stands to pay for cancer treatment. Exactly what I came here to say. Any of these stories about children working to pay for a family member's medical costs, or pay off their friend's school lunch debt and stuff, is absolutely not wholesome. It's not something a child should have to worry about, and it's a damning indictment of the society it happens in. Teachers giving up their sick days for some other teacher so that they can have days off for cancer treatment. So I work at a hospital and we can donate paid time off to co-workers. I have over 300 hours of paid time off. I've never really needed it. I don't really take vacations, I take mental health days instead. So, co-worker had a baby, she was out of paid time off and needed to stay home after her maternity leave was up. So I tried to donate 144 hours of paid time off and they approved 12. because someone else donated and she wasn't out of paid time off yet. Even when a company has paid time off donations, there are still guidelines and limitations. Really frickin' stupid. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Dating advice that includes relentlessly pursuing a woman who's made it clear that she doesn't like you. Lots of the blame for this can be placed on old rom-coms that basically show that stalking a woman will always end up with love. This type of mentality, combined with a thoroughly outdated and cringe-inducing sense of romanticism, made sure I was both a frickin' creeper and never got laid in my younger years. The only thing I feel more deeply than shame is guilt and regret at how uncomfortable I must have made the women around me. Hey, at least you recognize your previous faults and now you're better than you once were. Meanwhile, there's an insane amount of random dude bros and the like who still believe that this behavior isn't only correct, but the only option for pursuing others, which damages them, the person they're going after, and anyone else that buys into this bullcrap. Not to mention those that overcompensate the other way around and end up not acting on their feelings, even if they would have handled it more maturely, simply because they fear the possibility of making the other party uncomfortable. Every so often, I'll see a cute wildlife photo that's very obviously staged, probably to the stress of the animal or animals in question. It's absolutely messed up, but because people keep sharing them on social media, some buttholes out there will keep on essentially torturing animals just so that the rest of us can go, "Aww." Oh, we're all just one big family. If anyone tells you this in a workplace setting, run. They're only like a family in the sense of the most toxic parts of one that exploit you. Supporting someone no matter what choices they make. Look, you can love someone to the ends of the earth, that doesn't mean they'll be 100% right all of the time, no matter how much you love or admire them. I disagreed with my boyfriend on his handling of a family thing a few weeks ago, and he told me, "I feel like you're not on my side." He said it in a calm, sharing my feelings way, not in an accusatory way, to be fair to him. And I had to reply, "I'm always on your side 100%, but sometimes being on your side means pointing out things you missed or asking you to see things from another point of view. Because that's my truth. No one is always going to be right. That doesn't mean I don't support you." Any post that paints horrendous self-sacrifice in a positive light, really. It just breeds the mentality that you need to always put yourself last. Repeatedly professing your love for someone after they tell you that they aren't interested. The idea that you can make someone love you back if you just keep trying is rooted in toxicity, but romanticized in countless films and TV shows. When people film themselves doing things like giving a homeless person some money or food or helping an old person as something to be wholesome, when in actuality they're only doing it for the views. That's not wholesome, that's exploitative. Obese animals. It may be cute, but it's also mistreatment, and those animals are unhealthy. Of course, there are some rare occasions where a health condition leads to an animal being obese. I'm referring to the culture of praising obesity in animals because it's cute and gets you likes on social media. While we're at it, it's the same with pugs and other flat-faced dogs. Look, there's nothing wrong with adopting them, but it's their continued popularity that drives people to keep breeding them, and that should not be allowed. Their deformities impact their quality of life severely, and we shouldn't be subjecting animals to that just because it's cute. Also, whenever you voice concern about the well-being of pets, there's always the handful of people who are like, "Oh, just let people enjoy things. We're allowed to think things are cute." Well, yes, but you're sacrificing another animal's well-being to that end. Good vibes only posting. Let people experience real emotions, Sarah, not insta-perfect emulations of surfer chill. Proposing in front of a crowd puts a lot of pressure on the person being proposed to, don't you think? I mean, it's fine, only if said partner was already expecting a proposal and if they stated they're okay with such a proposal. Everything else might as well be manipulation. Receiving recognition for perfect attendance. Like hell you never got sick. 2 boys I went to high school with had perfect attendance. One of them was the valedictorian. He broke his jaw on a Sunday and came back to school with his mouth wired shut on Monday. He was miserable and clearly in a lot of pain, and for what? This lame certificate? I can't imagine letting my kid do that. The other kid had horrible mono and powered through a month of being sick and infecting countless others. He fainted in class one day, and the first thing he said when he woke up was, "Don't call an ambulance." I just want to ask them now if it was really worth it. With COVID, I hope this attitude dies forever, but I'm not confident. All inspiration prawn. football player asks girl with cerebral palsy out to prom is really just saying, hero stoops to level of gross disabled child for one day. It is dehumanizing. Toxic positivity, always saying cheer up or choose to be happy, is really hard to be around when you're depressed, and it really makes you feel guilty for feeling something other than 100%. This is me speaking from experience. Most relationships shown on TV. For real, why are so many so unhealthy? A good relationship on TV is Jake and Amy from Brooklyn Nine-Nine because whenever one of them has an issue, they work through it like normal adults. When people who are super spiritual and love all the time judge and ridicule you for not being in a good mood or for needing space, you're ruining the vibe. This isn't a hostile environment. Come on guys, gaslighting is wrong and these kinds of people do it all the time. I call them the love police. That's not love. Love is when you're able to accept someone no matter how they feel and respect if they need space or if they're not happy. Ugh, these people drive me crazy because that's not how love and acceptance works. Which is why how Eeyore's friends react to him in Winnie the Pooh is still unwittingly one of the best depictions of how to cope with someone of a more dour or depressed nature. Letting them feel out their feelings and still inviting them to everything regardless without judging them for being down. Yes, I have been watching cinema therapy, why do you ask? Asking kids to hug and kiss people. My mentor's kid is very shy and would refuse to even talk to his own family members. Often, people would pull him in for an interaction anyway, which he clearly wasn't happy with. So, I started asking for high fives, and he smiled lightly each time and gave a very enthusiastic high five. From there, he started getting more comfortable with me and would talk and play with me for a bit. So I think high fives are a good way to say hello without getting too awkward. It's important to acknowledge that it's your choice if you let other people touch you. If a kid doesn't want to, he or she should never be forced. When I visited him last time, I remember he decorated the stairs with balloons for me. It's a great feeling when a kid chooses to show you their affection in their own little way, and when they want to, and not because you asked for it. Toxic positivity, like when someone's having a really hard time and you tell them to stay positive or to try to look at the bright side. F you, Jenny, my grandma died. My dad saw a bloke nearly die from doing this. He told a man to cheer up who was on his way to collect his wife's body. YouTube kids channels, the ones aimed at older audiences, are literally better for a child than the kids' ones. The existence of most modern dog breeds. Pugs, for example. We all think they're super cute, but the truth is they're extremely deformed and constantly suffering as a result of a century of inbreeding. A lot of people don't know this, and it's really sad. I'm not saying those dogs should be put down right now, I'm just saying it would have been a better idea to not inbreed dogs for centuries. Filming yourself doing nice things for poor people. I'm not one of those people who say you shouldn't give money to the homeless, but giving $1,000 to a homeless man so you can film him getting emotional without knowing any of his history or underlying issues is problematic and makes you look fake. The I hate everyone but you trope in media. Only being nice to people you find attractive isn't cute. Acting like babies or flirting with people for smiling or waving or paying any attention towards another individual. I was staying over at someone's house because our car had gotten totaled nearby, and the 5-year-old boy who lived there came and snuggled up with me that night. My mum, being the perv she was, told me, you're the first woman he slept with other than his mother. What the frick, mum? The whole mentality of supporting your loved ones versus the world. It's wholesome because you're loyal. It's toxic when you know that they're wrong and they're causing harm to others. As much as it's adorable to support your loved ones against all odds, what's more adorable is to correct them, tell them that they're wrong and that you're on their side and that you'll both fix it together. Making amends with family because you've only got one. If someone wronged you, there's no obligation to make amends with them, even if they are family. I have an uncle who was recently released from prison after serving 20 or more years. He's always badgering me on why I never show up to family events and tries to guilt-trip me, saying how he wishes he had 20+ more years with them. I always tell him, well, it's because they treated me like crap, uncle. Family is family, but even family members can treat you like crap, and at that point you have no obligation to keep them around. School fundraisers. If the government can't give schools enough funds, then everything is wrong. People who have a best friend since we were 3 years old, but the friend is a butthole with people making excuses for him, like, oh, that's just how he is. They are loyal to this person, but that person is not deserving of it. Badgering people to have kids. No, I'm not going to magically change my mind when I meet the right girl. F off. The right girl for me is a big beardy lumberjack type who can enjoy a Cosmo with me. The social police. People who lose their crap when someone else likes to do things alone. Also, the moral police, like people getting unreasonably wound up at other people's moral transgressions that have nothing to do with them. These are the same people who demand some actor or footballer apologize to their fans for cheating on his wife. Like, it's between him and his wife, Karen, it's not your business at all. All of these feel-good stories like 8-year-old child sells keychains to pay off entire school's lunch debt. That's not wholesome, that's a sign of a terribly broken country. Companies that say employees are like family. Uncompensated labor, lack of clarity, volatility, no work-life boundaries, and emotional turmoil. Why were you banned from a store or restaurant? I once got barred from a pub for burping. I'm not crapping you, it was in the Conan Doyle pub in Edinburgh years ago. Our small group wasn't being disruptive or anything. My burp wasn't some intentional obnoxious display behavior intended to unsettle other people. It was actually quite discreet and simply the result of drinking carbonated beverages with nothing more to it than that. But we were sitting near the bar, the barman heard and we all got thrown out, and for objecting to it, initially thinking it was a bad joke, I got no crap full-on barred. Like I say, it wasn't some over-the-top eruption of a belch. It was the same kind you'd let loose in front of your own mother, followed by a quiet, "Excuse me." I thought at the time the barman was being a neurotic, over-assertive idiot, and my own time as a barman in the years since has only served to reinforce that impression. I got banned from the mall when I was younger because I wore an inappropriate shirt that I bought in the same mall. I had a Harry Potter wand keychain confiscated at TSA, the US airport security, earlier this year. I brought it in the same airport within the security zone on my last flight before that. Yeah, well, what if you started casting spells and stuff? I'm banned from a bar that a friend owns. I've played music in it at a steep discount because we were friends, donated to their fundraisers, got them loads of vintage glassware to use for free, promoted their events, even the ones with other musicians playing. It's because his wife can't stand the fact that he and I dated briefly 35 years ago. She melts down whenever anything triggers her about it and makes his life miserable. I had no idea. Apparently they were dating 30 years ago and broke up because he had to get a rain check on a date with her to be the witness at my City Hall wedding. They got back together 15 years after that. I found out about all this when making a Facebook post about the anniversary of that court date, and he messaged me to take it down. He explained the crazy and I complied and thought that everything was fine. Then I got invited to the bar for a private party of theirs 6 months later, and both of them were being horrible to me. I was very confused. I asked him what the problem was, and he said, "I don't like how he left things last December." And I was thinking, we? I went back and checked the messages. It seems right after he sent me the explanation, and before I responded apologizing for the triggering and saying I'd comply, someone blocked me in his account. So I think she went in and turned it off so he couldn't see that I was cooperating. So he thought that I blew him off. I sent emails, texts, and certified letters with screenshots showing what happened, but he's still angry at me. So, okay then. It's really sad as I loved that place and I loved playing there, and it's a nexus of our social group, but now I can't set foot inside. Well, sucks for you that got blocked off because of his crap bag wife, and sucks for this idiot that he can't see that maybe it's not a great relationship, that he'd be better off and happier if he just left. Sucks to suck, I guess. I was doing a history project on Poland, and it was well known this teacher gave an extra letter grade for bringing in food from the country we were studying. A friend from my previous school brought me to a bakery that made kolaks that his family loved. I ordered one for my class, paying a deposit and specifying the day I was due to present. I ran in before school to get my order, and the woman behind the counter, the manager, told me that whoever took my order never sent it. There was no kolaks in the store. Despite me presenting my invoice and pointing out the date they agreed to have it ready, she refused to refund my deposit on the basis that we can make it for you tomorrow. I had to call the credit card company and dispute the charge that way. A few days later, my friend called me and asked why we were both banned from the bakery. I was banned from the mall arcade when I was a kid for holding all the whack-a-moles down. I was also banned from an arcade, but for an even more bullcrap reason. It was for picking up quarters. I was a very young kid and saw that people would drop quarters and just never bothered to pick them up, or they didn't know they dropped them. So I'd pick them up from around the machines, nothing dangerous, nothing suspicious, and I'd use them to play. I'm not talking about stealing quarters from people who are going to pick them up, but ones that are just sitting there on the floor with no one around, covered in cobwebs and sand. The attendant argued they weren't mine and belonged to the shop and that I was stealing. I can kind of see the point since it's private property, but I was 7 years old. I spent plenty of my money in the arcade, and I was just using all these quarters I found right back in their rigged claw machines. It was just a crappy thing to do to complain and ban me. All they had to do was say, "Don't pick up the quarters," and I would have stopped. Got a story about someone who wasn't my friend but who I used to run track with. He thought it would be hilarious to put a pebble inside a piece of gum and throw it out the window of the bus on the way to a track meet. He thought it would just stick to the windshield and be a nuisance to someone. It ended up shattering part of the windshield because we're in a bus going motherfrickin' 55 miles per hour. The person we hit followed the bus all the way to the track meet. The cops came. The kid was banned from track. I'm not sure if he was banned from the bus, though. When I was 12, my favorite thing to do was play laser tag at the one laser tag place in our town. I'd go every Friday night and play for 3 hours or so. There weren't many other regular players, so nobody else was getting better at it like I was. After about a year, I was just wrecking everyone, and the owner ended up banning me from the place because it was driving away customers. It really sucked because it was my favorite activity, and I was just immediately cut off from it. 6 years later, I found a place in another city that had other players that played regularly, so I was able to start playing again with people at similar skill levels. I got banned from Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey several times in the early 90s. Back when I was in high school, season passes were like $40 or something, making it a no-brainer to buy one, if you intended to go at least twice. My friend and I probably went 5 to 7 days a week since we lived so close by. We knew the park and its operations better than pretty much anyone who didn't work there, and eventually we grew too comfortable with taking shortcuts through the employee area, trying to climb things we shouldn't, bothering other guests, and overall being a bunch of New Jersey teenagers, aka jerks. The thing is, the only IDs we had on us were our season passes, which we always assigned fake names for no pre-planned reason. In the summer of 1994, my pass said Oscar Schindler, for example. We eventually got in so much trouble they'd take our passes and tell us we were banned for life. Well, another $40 at the front gate and boom, back in as Itzhak Stern. They needed at that time to figure out the flaws in their system. This is how I got banned from Chuck E. Cheese. I figured out that I could take a ball from the game where you shoot the clown's teeth and use it at the skee-ball machine. The skee-ball machine would count the points but not the ball used, which enabled me to play forever with just one ball and max out the machine. I did it on 2 skee-ball machines before someone noticed and I got banned and kicked out. I got mistaken for somebody else while on holiday a few years back. I popped into a local shop to grab a sandwich and drink, and a staff member forcefully marched over to me and yelled, "You're not allowed in here, I've told you before," as she grabbed my sandwich and bottle of water from me and put them back. Of course, I tried to protest and explained that I'd never been there before and was a visitor to the area, but she gestured for the security guard to come over and escort me out and stood watching from a distance with her arms folded and a smug look on her face, occasionally shouting, "If she doesn't go, I'm calling the police." Thankfully, the security guard was a little more understanding of the situation and happily looked at my driver's license, which proved I lived in a different area. I offered to show it, but then he said, "But perhaps it would be best if you didn't come in here again anyway." I drunkenly stumbled into the big pyramid of wine glasses that were for some reason stacked on the side of the bar. After they all fell and smashed everywhere, causing a huge scene, I proceeded to tell the bartender that it wasn't me. 2 seconds later, I was in a headlock being dragged outside by a large bouncer. My longtime barber had oozing pink eye, and I merely told him I'd come back the next week. He told me not to come back at all. That's a sensitive man right there. You'd think that maybe if you were an ongoing regular and were concerned about catching the old pinky, he'd understand that maybe you didn't want to take your chances with him. Taking pictures of produce and price signs at a small grocery store while shopping. I was just trying to keep track of which of the stores had which food at cheaper prices so I could plan my shopping trips. They thought you were a competitor. It actually does happen. I worked at gas stations for years and had to check competition prices all the time. No biggie, but every so often I'd have to check an inside item price, like cigarettes or candy. It was very awkward and I felt like a criminal. I was banned from the library as a kid. Overdue fees. They let you go up to $70 before cancelling your card. I was an avid reader and my mum hated taking me to the library, always said she would and then changed her mind last minute. It was a 6-mile round trip, so I'd take a wheeled suitcase and get around 25 at a time. The books added up fast. I resorted to stealing books and returning them, and I'm pretty sure some of the librarians just turned a blind eye. They forgive the debt when you turn 18. I was banned from the college cafeteria for taking in a digital food safety thermometer and a copy of the state health department temperature ranges. They were consistently 20 to 40 Fahrenheit low, and food poisoning was a common problem. Nothing says, "We totally hear your legitimate safety concerns," like "Get the frick out, you're banned." Feeding the seagulls. We ruined the entire upper deck's dining experience with a few French fries. Dozens, maybe hundreds swarmed. It was like a scene from The Birds. People had to evacuate. Back in the late 80s, I was in the Florida Keys with a group of friends. I got drunk and went to bed, and some of the guys went out bar hopping. The next morning, a deputy sheriff showed up at the place we were renting, told us to pack our things, and he'd escort us to the county line, and we weren't to come back. So not only did I get banned from an entire Florida county, I never did get a straight story about what the guys who were at the bar did to get us banned. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend and I were banned for life from a casino in Las Vegas 20-something years ago. We had gone for his 21st, which was the week prior. Despite being of legal age, he looked appropriately 12. After being carded by a cocktail waitress for the 700th time, she recommended he go to the security desk, show his ID, and get a stamp on his hand showing he was 21. That way he wouldn't have to keep pulling out his license. Great! We go to security, they stamp my hand in 2 seconds but start examining his ID real closely. They pull out the guideline for all of the state's driver's license, call over a supervisor, and finally they just say, "No, sorry, this is fake. It says under 21 on it." My friend at first calmly tried to explain that he turned 21 the week before and was under 21 when he got the license, which is why it was on there. He lived in one state, was going to college in another, and hadn't gone home to renew his license yet, but it wasn't expired, so it was valid. They said, "This is a private establishment, we're not comfortable with it, and we're asking you to leave." Now, he had a bad temper, which I knew, and he'd been drinking. I tried to defuse the situation and said, "Hey, screw this place, there's 100 casinos left on the strip, let's go somewhere else." He agreed and we headed for the door. Then 10 feet from the exit, I hear, "Screw it, I'm giving that jerk a piece of my mind." And 5 minutes later, we were escorted to a room off the floor, had our pictures taken, and we were told we were banned for life, and if we ever returned, would be charged with trespassing. I haven't been back to Vegas since then, but if I do, I'd like to walk in to test their facial recognition software. I got banned from a local Kmart about 25 years ago for figuring out that if you just slapped the handle on the old twist-turn candy dispensers that took a quarter, it would give you free candy. Yeah, they call that stealing. They took my photo and everything. For the record, I did in fact know it was wrong, and I don't dispute on a technicality that I was stealing. It actually taught me a good lesson, honestly. Still though, I was just a kid and being walked into a security office for my photo was terrific. I tried to pay my cover or entry fee to a bar one time with $2 bills, and instead of taking my money, the bouncer told me to leave in a not super polite manner. I got banned from the local orthodontist because during an appointment my mum asked the doctor why her degree was from the US. We live in France. My mum was genuinely curious and had just wanted to talk, but for some reason the doctor took it really badly. He insulted my mum while I had the cheek retractor in my mouth and left the room. Fortunately, it was my penultimate appointment, and on the last one he was really aggressive and told us never to come back and to go see someone else for my siblings. I was banned from a Kmart. A friend and I went to the local one and took one of those air duster can things and froze bouncy balls with it. If you tip it upside down and spray it, super cold liquid comes out, cold enough to freeze things and even cold burn you. We froze bouncy balls and shattered them, on the ground. We did it to 2 of them. We were both banned. We were also 17 at the time. We were idiots. My family has been banned from the local Marco's Pizza for years because of my mum. She used to have some anger issues and also really loves garlic butter. When the Marcos forgot to include the garlic butter with the order, she called and asked them to deliver the single cup of garlic butter to our house. The Marcos reasonably said they can't do that, but she could come and get it. She stormed over there with our pizza and proceeded to smear the whole thing on their windows and counters. Haven't had Marcos since. On the one hand, I get being peeved. They could have done more, like maybe giving you a $5 gift voucher or something next time. But on the other hand, if you're really already driving over, don't make that journey some Pyrrhic gesture that removes the thing you love, the garlic butter, from your life forever. I used to work at a sushi restaurant. I got fired or banned because I told the manager that some of the food smelled like it was expired and maybe we should throw it out. Next thing I know, she's giving me my check and kicking me out. For legal reasons, I can't say the name, but I will say it's in the San Fernando Valley. They have 2 locations, one in Encina and one in Tarzana. Their name has 3 words. I went to a bar that had newly opened with friends, ordered some drinks, cocktails and stuff. They took forever to make it, and after an hour we still didn't have all the ordered drinks, and some of the ones we did get were wrong. So we wanted to leave and requested the bill. They gave us the full bill, like they wanted us to pay even for the things we never got simply because we ordered them. And of course they expected a generous tip. We argued that we wouldn't pay for drinks that we never got. They called us liars and jerks, threatened to call the cops, and that from now on we were banned from that establishment. We told him we didn't mind and to go ahead and call the cops. When he went into his bureau to call, we quickly calculated what we owed, slapped the money on the table, and got the heck out of there. They went out of business like a half-year later and had to sell the bar. The new owner is okay. Went to a training course out of town when I was 21, and because it was a long journey, the entire group just booked hotel rooms for the night. I booked a single room for myself and got placed on the opposite end of the hotel from the rest of my group, who were all sharing with classmates. Only time I left the room after arriving was to get some dinner and then to go to the bar to watch a football match, where I sat with lecturers who accompanied us and spent the time chatting with them and the barman. Headed to bed at about 11. As I was heading up to my room, I passed my group who were heading out to a nearby nightclub. I had a quick smoke with them outside before they took my number as a kind of emergency contact for themselves. Anyway, next morning comes and I was down in the lobby for 7, grabbing some tea and some breakfast, and I went to ask for something at the reception, when I overheard a group of elderly people in front of me complaining at the desk about the noise last night. Apparently my group had come back completely off their heads and brought back a lot of friends from the nightclub. The manager had every room inspected before we left the property and was going to charge for any damages done. Honestly, it was completely understandable. Some rooms, from what I gather, were utterly trashed. I nipped out for a smoke, knowing my room was perfectly fine. Heck, I even stripped the bed down before I left to save housekeeping the bother. But nope, I got called to the desk and told I was being charged an extra $300 for damages done. I inquired about the damages and asked to be brought up and shown them. I went up, followed by the manager, a receptionist, housekeeping, and one other staff member, and they showed me the, quote, damaged room. They told me it was a disgrace and that we were barred, and the cops could be called if we refused to pay the damages. It was incredibly condescending and snobbish. But he shut up very fast the moment I asked if we should compare the time-stamped images I took upon entering the room for the first time the previous day to the current damage he was charging me for. I took my phone out and opened it and flashed the pics. He didn't even look at it. All the damage that I'd caused was there when I arrived the previous day and was at worst minor that any resident handyman could fix in minutes. The manager was looking to make a profit on a Tuesday night and was looking to con a group of students out of it and got too greedy and it cost him. I informed the lecturers and asked very loudly if I should indeed call the police due to them trying to scam us, but we were late for day 2 of the course, so I just left. Nobody paid. I filed a complaint after I left. The hotel was lovely, to be fair, and I tried to go back a few years later with my partner as a surprise getaway present for her, but wouldn't you know it, I was banned from the hotel. My uncle always told me to take pics when entering a hotel room, and obviously the same crap had happened to him previously. My roommates and I, along with a few friends, went out to a bar one night to drink. We had grown a single beautiful watermelon in our yard and brought him along to the party with us. Named him Walter Melon, pronounced Melone, snuck the watermelon into the bar and generally just passed it around and praised him for being a good melon. At first, the bouncers didn't care. They came up to us and just told us to be careful with it. Then one of my friends got pretty drunk and started holding it above his head and dancing with it. At this point, security decided they'd had enough of our shenanigans and tried to take it from us. My drunk friend agreed with them that he'd leave with the melon. A few minutes later, he made it back to the bar with the melon under his jacket. He'd snuck in through the back and avoided the bouncers. Once they saw the melon again, they got pretty angry and kicked us all out. We argued for our melon back, but to no avail. Rest in peace, Walter Malone. Funnily enough, there was this other group of guys who had left the bar and had seen or heard about the melon incident. As we were all hanging outside the bar waiting for an Uber, they drove past, stopped and handed us a pumpkin. So, we ended the night melonless, but with a new pumpkin friend. We got banned temporarily, but I could probably go back. Sounds like it wasn't entirely a fruitless endeavor. And I say that because I'm fairly certain that technically a pumpkin is a fruit. Shame about your melon compadre though. Rest in peace, Walter. A bar owner of a dangerous dive bar where I got super drunk and enlisted the help of 10 regulars to beat the crap out of one of my friends. He was hospitalized and they double-charged me before we left and then I was banned. It's been years and to this day we still don't know what started it. Someone got jumped behind the bar nearly every Friday night, so it was only a matter of time. I talked it over with my police officer buddy and they sent officers to request the recording of the parking lot from that night. The tapes were apparently missing and we were crap out of luck, wouldn't you know it? I just got thrown out of a restaurant for shouting at another diner. She had been insulting her child loudly for 10 minutes. The kid didn't do anything in response and just kept eating. You can't eat properly. You're gross. I don't know what she thought the kid was doing wrong. Maybe not using a fork properly? Twice the woman did that thing that people do to mock disabled people. You know? Ugh. And this was all loud enough that nobody could ignore it. All of the other diners were turning round to glare at her. I was wondering how to intervene. There was too much anger in my mind. Then her partner said something quietly about how she was spoiling everyone else's lunch, and she snapped back, "It's your fault for not restraining the kid." At this point, I lost it. I jumped up, pointed at her, and shouted, You are the problem. And I told her that children should be encouraged and praised, that she was setting the kid up for a lifetime of feeling worthless. And how dare she treat a child that way? I don't remember what else I said. I was full-on berserker angry by this point. "Excuse me," said the staff. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Oh, of course. I'm sorry," I said to the staff. "I'm sorry," I said to the other diners, and then, "But I'm not bloody sorry to you." I don't think that woman will change. I expect she'll punish the child when they get home. But the child will never forget this day. Hopefully they'll know that someone opposes her mother, that someone can fight in their corner. That was 1,000 times worth getting thrown out of a restaurant. Zookeepers. What's the lowdown, dirty, inside scoop on zoos? Some people like to bring fruit and stuff to throw into the animals' cages, even though they're not supposed to. If you're around and someone throws a pineapple into the gorilla or chimpanzee dens, get the frick out. They will throw that thing full blast at someone. I saw a man get hit full force right in the side of the head and he was lights out. Pineapple exploded on impact. Paramedics came and everything. I had to draft the zoo's contingency plan for all sorts of emergencies. Flood, tornado, extreme heat, war, attacks, you name it. The plan included a prioritized list of which animals in the collection we'd have to sacrifice to feed the other animals in extreme situations. I literally created a zoo food chain. Humans were left off the list entirely. Rhinos may look super intimidating, and they can hurt you, don't get me wrong, but they really just act like big dogs. They love being scratched and they'll eat all the fruit out of your hand. A zoo kind of place I worked at on occasion calls them winos because they roll over and whimper because they want belly rubs with a bristle brush. Late to the party, but I wanted to mention all the older animals. Sometimes people don't realize there are older critters who have health issues. A lot of older fish we had were kept in back tanks away from view because people assumed normal old fish issues were a result of poor husbandry and they'd get upset if they were on display. Imagine having your 17-year-old incontinent dog in a zoo. People would think it looks emaciated and pathetic. Along the same lines, zoos have improved significantly in terms of animal husbandry over the years, but a lot of older animals have been in zoos since before these changes occurred. I remember working with a group of chimps, and one of the old chimps would tickle his pickle while staring at me as I'd clean the outside of the enclosure. I had to remember this guy joined the zoo at a time when they'd dress chimps up in kids' clothes and make them have tea parties and crap. He had some mental issues that definitely weren't his fault. Thankfully, that troop has gotten better housing and care and has now started acting more normally, even reproducing with their own troop members and acting like real apes should. I volunteer at an aquarium, and people always ask about whether the sharks that are in with the fish ever eat the fish. Officially, we say, oh, we keep them well fed enough that they don't. But on more than one morning on my initial walk around, I found remains of fish that definitely weren't meant to be eaten. On a particularly memorable occasion, I found the head of a large porgy just sitting on the bottom. A diver went in and got it before the guests arrived. I mean, I believe you. I've always been incredulous that anyone could claim to reliably control the behavior of animals, all of whom are unpredictable at the best of times. I guess the only part I'm still confused about is how this never happened in front of customers. Seeing a shark obliterate a small cute fish would either be nightmare fuel or the highlight of a kid's day, depending on the kid. I've designed equipment and caging for zoos. I've been told many horror stories on how some animals would get hurt or even killed because of trying to find ways out of their caging. They can range from really stupid to incredibly brilliant. I had to replace a giraffe indoor pen. The previous one had vertical bars. Think old jail cell bars. A bull giraffe stuck his head out, and then turned his head and went back to the side through another set of bars to see what was behind him. He freaked out and essentially hung himself. So we couldn't use vertical bars that they could stick their heads through. I witnessed a silverback gorilla having a really bad day. He seemed tired of the crowd and put a box on his head to make the world go away. People kept watching, he kept getting annoyed, and finally he threw the box off, charged us, and pounded on the glass. And yeah, I'm well aware that glass can take several shots from a .50 caliber rifle, but the explosive bang from the gorilla hitting the glass was insane and terrified everyone. Then there's ostriches. They run primarily on instinct. I designed a cage for the vet to treat them with. It was entirely enclosed and had multiple small doors all around the cage. The reason is that the vet told me about an instance where an ostrich got its foot cut and needed stitches. They got the bird in the cage, and one of the vets fed the bird and the other stitched up the cut. No anesthesia, just a diversion. The bird kept eating and didn't care about getting the stitches. In a different zoo, they needed to replace the caging of a very large bird of prey. I don't remember the species, but I do remember seeing what its claws did to the aluminium tubing cage they kept it in. The aluminium was shredded, and whoever was on the other side was either going to have a very bad day or get what they deserved for annoying this bird. I of course went with stainless steel heavy gauge rod for the cage. The shop hated all the welding, but in the end the cage was way nicer and stronger than the old one. I didn't get to travel much with the installation crew, but I was in the shop supervising the building of the caging. There were many times I've had to have things re-welded or redone because of safety and quality control issues. Remember when you visit a zoo that oftentimes your life depends on someone that isn't qualified or is underpaid and overworked. Whenever I visit a zoo, I look at the structure design and how it was put together. Too many times I see welds that are of poor quality and barely hold the structure in place, let alone stop something big and heavy that's angry. I work with dolphins, and let me tell you, those creatures are randy motherfrickers. We have 2 smaller boys together, and they've been seen stimulating each other. Our 3 female dolphins have freshwater hoses that lead into the pool to play with. They flip themselves upside down, lay on a surface, and let the water do its thing. We also have another male dolphin separate from the others that likes to show his member to families. It's pretty funny to watch, to be honest. Dolphins are just weird. Fun fact about the local zoo I learned when I worked maintenance, there's a wolf enclosure. There's info about the wolves, it's maintained. They're just shy and in their shelter. There are no wolves and never have been. My partner was a zookeeper in Dallas. Safety protocols for when a large, dangerous animal escapes its enclosure dictate that you lock yourself in whatever room you can get to quickest and grab the nearest weapon, which for most zookeepers is a broom or rake for cleaning up animal doo-doo. We told the public that we had closed the baboon exhibit because a baboon had unfortunately passed away and the troupe was, quote, grieving. In reality, they were throwing parts of the body around and there was nothing we could do about it. When I was a teenager in the 90s, I did volunteer work at the Oakland Zoo. There weren't many of us, so we got to choose where we helped out, so I chose to work with Bhakti, the 32-ish-year-old Bengal tiger, nearly the oldest living in captivity when he finally passed. I chose him because he was beautiful and he always seemed lonely. He had pacing syndrome hardcore, so his entire paddock was green and lush, except for the paths along the outer fence line and 1 or 2 diagonals he used to get into and out of his night cage. The keepers did their best with him, but had clearly written him off. He was grumpy, antisocial, and hid from the public, swiped and hissed at his keepers, and ignored all of the enrichment toys and food put out to keep him mobile. They had a few young Siberian tigers in quarantine already, waiting to be put on display. They just had to wait for him to pass, and the stubborn old cat had lived in spite of them. He'd always start the morning by pacing his fence line, so I started pacing with him. No eye contact, no sounds, just walking back and forth for an hour or 2. After a couple of weeks, he started chuffing at me when I arrived, so I learned how to mimic it to say hi back. Another month, he'd actually break his pacing circuit to walk with me, jogging his ancient, arthritic butt from wherever he was across the green sections to match me. The poor guy just needed a friend. I still get a bit misty-eyed thinking about him, just a lonely old cat who had to spend the last years of his life basically alone. Don't get me wrong though, the keepers really did do their best, but they couldn't spend all day with one animal like I could. They had many duties and creatures to care for, and he had a really steep barrier to entry as a friend. As grumpy as he was, I still think he was good people. I worked in an animal refuge in Bolivia. We were told on our first day to not let the tapir turn its back on you. Forgetting that vital piece of info, 3 days later, I was filming the tapir as it started to turn its back on me and my friend. Before we could react, its eggplant did a 180-degree turn and projectiles splooged all over my phone and gaping mouth. We couldn't get rid of the smell for days. If you ever come close to a tapir, do not let it turn its back on you. Wow. So the narrator was expecting a shower of doo-doo, not what we ended up getting. My god, that is a plot twist. And this happened regularly enough that you were warned in advance? What the hell is wrong with you, tapir, you prevert? Listen, lions know full well that they can't get through the glass. They do that just to get attention. I worked at a zoo, in their museum function, not with the animals, and there was no glass in the big cat's enclosure. There was a giant moat, which the tigers were always playing in, and a 20-odd-foot straight vertical concrete wall. You could tell when they were in play mode. They'd pace back and forth along the edge of the moat and suddenly jump in, surprise, and roll around on their backs. For the casual visitor, they seemed like an oversized house cat. While they absolutely had small house cat-like behaviors, I could never for a second forget what they could do. There was this one particularly traumatic event with the lions on a very warm and very packed day. The zoo was inside a large park, so various animals wandered around the zoo all day. One unfortunate day, a large deer fell into the lion enclosure. The lion stalked it and ran it down within 30 seconds and tore the deer to shreds, in front of a dozen horrified adults and screaming kids. I felt kinda bad that so many people saw, but like, circle of life. I mean, that was probably the best day ever for that lion though. Imagine, a warm pizza and Xbox controller falling from the sky into your lap. That's the kind of day he's having. I used to work at a zoo a few years ago. An elephant died while I was there, and to transport the body out of its enclosure, they had to chop him up. Rest in peace, Toto. Dead zoo animals are sometimes fed to carnivores. There's a farm and zoo in the UK that uses crocodiles to get rid of dead cows. The owner once said he'd like the same end when he dies. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The poor penguin keepers can never quite get rid of the miasma of dead fish that envelops them. As for me, the stinkiest job I ever had to do was cleaning out the duck ponds. Managed to empty a whole train carriage that evening, even though I'd changed and my work clothes were double-bagged. That's the truth. As a teen, I worked as a janitor at a private school. One of my duties was dumping out and rinsing the kiddie pool belonging to the duck. The muck on the bottom of that thing, especially in summer, frickin' stank. My wife was a zookeeper, and I used to volunteer there a lot. Most zookeeping is just picking up doo-doo and making and delivering the animals food. The last animal that was at least scary was a cheetah. They were pretty cool, ignoring everything as long as they had food. The most scary to me were the giraffes. Back then, you went into the enclosures with them, and they'd sometimes swing their heads around and try to club you just to be pricks. You had to be careful. And the job would actually be fantastic if they didn't let human beings into the zoo. I went on a behind-the-scenes tour of the zoo once. Saw quite a few bunnies come out during the tour. The neighboring park had a problem with people abandoning pet rabbits, you see. It was pretty clear the dumb bunnies were getting into predator enclosures. The tour guide confirmed that they were regularly getting eaten. Tour guides also indicated other urban wildlife problems. Raccoons, possums, squirrels, and birds were regularly consumed. They said that when they drained the lion enclosure moat for maintenance, it was filled with the bones of small animals. The most amusing stories were about the orangutans, who were wicked smart. Zookeepers had trained them to give over items in exchange for food in case they needed to get something from them in the enclosure. But you see, orangutans are smart, and they realized that if they broke things up and handed them back in small pieces, they'd get more food. They once disassembled a radio that accidentally got left in the enclosure. When there was an opossum in the enclosure, the results were a bit more gruesome. If you work with the animals, there's a good chance you'll not be able to have any kind of social life between the long hours and weekends and the stench. I've been kicked out of stores after work because I apparently stunk way worse than I thought I did, even after scrubbing off. And I'm around animals every day, but I still can't stand when otters and sea lion keepers around me are in an all-hands meeting. The rotten fish and ferrety otter smell combo is a gagger. Meanwhile, I work with apes, and they say that I smell like I haven't showered in a decade, and this is after I take a shower. Some zoos intentionally put chickens in enclosures with non-predatory animals, as the chicks go around eating pests and bugs all day, which keeps the other animals happier. I work at a zoo in a northern country. I can't say which as it will give it away. We had a white tiger, and we were quite famous for it. One day, the zoo announced the tiger had died of natural causes. Whilst working there a few years after he died, I was told by a keeper that there was actually a problem with the electric fencing in his enclosure that the zoo managers refused to pay to get fixed, thinking it would be fine. The tiger was electrocuted to death a few weeks after they found the problem. They covered up the whole thing by saying they weren't sure how he died, but that he was old. It's still a zoo secret to this day. I worked in two completely different departments, elephants and neonates, but the drama between keepers was insane in both, like attempted murder level insane. We didn't have mad drama, but damn near everyone was doing it with everyone else. There was a girl from birds that cheated on her boyfriend, who was also in birds, with a guy on small primates. It turned into a whole thing with everyone having an opinion. Aha! Well, good to know that zoo staff are the same as literally every other workplace on the planet under the facade of helpfulness and being in tune with nature. Gossipy, factious, and crazy romance drama. Classic humans. Maybe we're the ones who should be in a zoo. Oh boy, I remember my first day working with foxes. My coworker was giving a tour of the facility to a family where they got to play with the foxes, and she made a big deal about, "Make sure you don't touch anything wet in here. It might be fox pee, and it will absolutely not come out of anything, including skin." She even gave them gloves to wear. Then they left, and she told me to start cleaning. I said, "Wait, don't we have to protect ourselves from the fox pee, like you said?" She sort of laughed and said, "You work here now. Get used to your new smell." Sure enough, I inevitably got some fox pee on my hand. I washed it several times, I smelled it before bed that night, and sure enough, it smelled exactly like fox pee, very strongly. Washing not only didn't remove it, it didn't seem to even diminish it a little bit. By now I've stopped noticing, but nobody else has. Our lions will empty their bladders onto guests if they get too close, which is always funny to see, not so funny to smell. I work with large tortoises. We had these 5-gallon buckets for cleaning animal doo-doo out of enclosures and other buckets for feeding them fresh grass that we cut. The first day on the job, I took both buckets into the pen and started dumping out the grass. Then I went around to collect the number 2. I heard this awful loud grunting and something breaking. One of the 300-pound males tried to mate with the bucket in front of visitors and flattened it. He'd even follow me around just in case I might leave more innocent buckets unattended. I spoke to a zookeeper at the National Zoo in DC. We were watching another keeper inside of the cheetah enclosure, and I asked him about the dangers involved. He said a cheetah is harmless to an adult human because it only hunts smaller creatures. I asked which creature was the worst to go in with, expecting hippo, elephant, or crocodile as an answer. Without hesitating, he said, "Zebras," and then leaned close and whispered, "They are the biggest jerks on the planet. They will bite and kick for no reason." I still think it's hilarious that of all the teeth and claws out there, it's the striped donkeys that are the worst. The amount of injuries you can just casually pick up from animals is crazy. I've been kicked in the chest by a kangaroo, almost had the unspeakable act committed against me by an emu, been attacked by a wombat and a bat, bitten by a monitor lizard and a carpet python, had a rhino charge at me, and been scratched by a macaque. My old boss had this awesome scar from a snow leopard attack, and this guy I work with now has his entire left forearm mangled from an orangutan. To explain some of these examples, regarding the emu unspeakable act story, I was cleaning out its outside enclosure and was told to not squat down in front of him as he was in season, as in it was his mating season. Well, you can guess what I forgot. I squatted down in front of him to pick up some crap, and I found out the hard way that ratites, or flightless birds, do not have a cloaca and in fact have full-blown members. The orangutan? They are not the gentle giants you think they are. All apes, and I mean all of them, have the capacity to maim, disfigure, or kill if you annoy them enough. Don't look them directly in the eye for an extended period of time, don't smile at them, and for the love of God, don't invade their personal space. Had a piercing ripped out by a macaw, fingers and hands torn up from handling and training conures and other large parrots, quite a few nasty bites from small mammals like hamsters, gerbils, and ferrets if you'd believe that, a few injuries from horses, but nothing out of the ordinary. It also shocks you how dumb people can be. There could be a huge sign that says, "Hello, I'm an echidna, not a porcupine," and people will still ask if that's a baby porcupine. You get used to the same jokes every day, like when you're cleaning up the outside enclosures in view of guests, someone will eventually say, "Oh, what a strange animal, I wonder what kind it is," in regards to seeing a human, or the amount of people who scream, "Hump day," when they see a camel. I have no qualms about picking up animal doo-doo barehanded. I know what my animals have been eating, I know what's in their digestive system, and to me that makes it more bearable. I can have long discussions about poop consistency with my coworkers, and in fact, that's what a lot of general health talks are about. Homer's stool was a little looser than normal this morning. I wonder if something happened overnight to stress him out. You get used to being stinky as well. I currently work 8+ hours with primates daily, and I feel awful for the people who share a space with me when I go to the gym directly after work. Primate doo smells very similar to human stuff. When I was at the zoo, I smelled exclusively of rhino pee and I could not get it off me. When you're cleaning underneath the perches, parrots will wait for you to look up before taking a dump. They have good aim. That's how you get crap in the mouth. Do not look up. This does not surprise me in the slightest. Birds are the devil, and all of them are out to get us at any given second, and the bigger they are, the meaner. I still appreciate them for how real they are about it, though. Not quite a zookeeper, but I'm training to be one. The zebras and Przewalski horses are ruthless, and they'll tear apart any unfortunate wild kangaroo that dares break into an enclosure. They love the thrill of the chase and the subsequent kill when they get bored. Former coworker got a job at the aquarium. He was basically the night watchman, making sure nothing exploded when the aquarium was closed. The thing is, he couldn't actually do anything about that. A ray jumped out onto the open touch pool, so he gently picked it up and set it back in the tank. No harm done, the ray was fine. But he got chewed the F out for handling an animal. Policy is to call the expert handler for that department and have them come in to avoid any liability and whatnot. By the time you get them to pick up the phone at 3 a.m., get up and drive into the city, it'll have been like 40 minutes at best, assuming that they came in at all. So his job was really just to stand there staring as the animal suffocated. He ended up quitting when he tried to call out sick because he had the flu. He had it so bad he literally couldn't stand up straight, and part of the job was to walk the narrow, hanging walkway over the largest tank in the world, which includes sharks, alone, at night. And then they told him to come in anyway. I'm a small animal vet now, but I worked in a zoo before vet school. Zoos are one of the biggest purchasers of Calvin Klein's Obsession cologne. The cologne has animal musk in it, and it drives the big cats wild. We used to spray it on everything. To explain, all captive animals require some sort of enrichment in their environment. In zoos, they have rooms full of toys, scents, and treats that the animals get on different schedules to keep things interesting for them. Think of it like getting a new dog toy or treat at the local pet store. Cats, in general, are very pheromone-driven animals, so the cologne is used almost like catnip for domesticated cats. I remember soaking a whole bunch of toys and tossing them into the enclosure. I used to work at a zoo, and I can tell you that cold weather makes the animals more active, so go on a chilly day or first thing in the morning to see the best show from the animals. Also, those free-roaming peacocks are really stupid and sometimes go into the lion's exhibit and get torn apart. My mum worked at a zoo when I was a kid, and there were some things that were kept under wraps. For one, a hyena escaped once and they had to track it down. Also, a pack of dogs got into the zoo and killed most of the wallabies. The worst story was that a group of teenagers broke in the 80s and pulled some legs off the flamingos. That one always really bothered me. When did you witness a crime being committed by someone who had no clue what they were doing? When I worked at Hollywood Video, before that evil corporation went out of business, finally, a man came into my store and bought one bag of popcorn. When I opened the register, he pulled out a box cutter from his pocket and told me to give him all the money. My first reaction was to laugh. I couldn't believe I was being robbed. Then he waved the box cutter around and saw he wasn't horsing around, to which I told him he wasn't getting anything. He said he'd cut me, and I told him good luck climbing over the counter to get to me. He then placed his hands on the counter and leaned towards me. I grabbed a box cutter of my own and said, "Well, would you look at that? A Mexican standoff." Now, here's where it gets silly. The man asked if I was threatening him. I said, "No, sir," still laughing at the situation. He proclaimed he was calling the police, and I said, "Please do." He did, and then he waited for the police to arrive. He told them I brandished a box cutter and threatened his life. I then showed the fine officer our security footage, and wouldn't you know it, he arrested my new friend. That's my favorite work story. Call it bullcrap if you want. I worked at a bowling alley in high school. We had a guy climb up into the ceiling in the restroom and wait until we were closed so that he could climb down and rob it. Not only did he not get any money because everything was locked in a gigantic safe from the 1930s that probably weighed over 1,000 pounds, but the guy couldn't even get out of the building. All the steel fire doors were padlocked on the outside, and I guess he didn't want to risk being seen smashing the glass on the front doors, since it was right by a busy road. Our wannabe criminal did the only logical thing, which was to go back to the bar and drink all night. The manager found him passed out on the floor when he opened up in the morning. An Aussie guy I knew was out drinking in Canada with another Aussie mate. His mate left early to go back to the flat they were sharing in Vancouver, and they were accosted in a dark alley by two men with knives. Being absolutely sloshed off his face, he failed to pick up on the man's intent, or their knives, and simply pushed them aside saying, "Yeah, nah, sorry mate, I'm Australian," and continued to F off home. The poor fellow later realized he'd just brushed off two armed muggers by telling them he was Australian and ignoring them. There were two guys from my high school that robbed a little convenience store. They had ski masks and gats, and the robbery went pretty smoothly for them. But they also decided to wear their Letterman coats with their names on the back. They were later arrested. Maybe they were that dumb, but I'd also say that there was a non-zero chance that those guys got framed by other people who knew what they were doing with their disguises. Although I suppose the police would do their due diligence and search. But can you imagine getting your high school bully back by wearing a Letterman jacket with their name on it while you rob a place? Back when I worked at Walmart, one of the best laughs I ever got while working there was watching two middle-aged women run into the store, grab about 50 of those Visa gift cards from the rack, then run out of the store laughing while they did it. You have to activate them. They're completely worthless without being activated. I bet those ladies were pretty upset when they realized they'd just stolen a crapload of nothing. I was parked in the far end of a parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store, sitting in the driver's seat, checking a few emails and letting my window defrost. I had the window rolled down just a tiny bit, basically enough for someone to fit their arm through if they really tried. That's relevant very soon. A guy approached from the back, so I heard him and looked that way. He tells me to get out of the car. The door is locked and he's holding a knife towards the window. He doesn't have a firearm. I just kind of look at him and say, "No," with a confused look. My firearm is in my shoulder holster, but my coat is buttoned up. He awkwardly tries to open the door, can't, and then actually sticks his arm through the tiny part of the window that's rolled down. I immediately hit the button and roll it up, so he's just stuck there, screaming in pain and pounding on the window with his other hand. He finally drops the knife, so I let the window down a bit, and he runs off. In college, I worked as a loss prevention guy for one of the big boxes. Sit in a little room and watch cameras to catch shoplifters. We were having a problem with customers' wallets being stolen out of the men's fitting rooms. The victim would go in, try on a new pair of pants, come out to show his wife, and then when he went back to the fitting room, his wallet would be gone. So one afternoon, I get a call from the sales staff about a fight in the men's fitting room. I run down there to find a 6'2" black guy with a 5'2" white guy in a headlock. The black guy caught the white guy coming out of his room with his wallet. Turns out the black guy's wallet was his Secret Service badge and credentials. Whoops! A few weeks ago, I was getting home from late night classes when this guy jumps out and says, "Give me all your money," or something like that. The problem is, he has no weapon. No shooter, no knife, he wasn't even a threatening-looking guy. I just sort of walked past him back to my dorm. The guy keeps at it until we get near my dorm. He gets in front of the door and demands my money. I pick up a rusted pipe that's always near the door and he backs off. Laziest criminal ever. I had a chav do a similar thing, but he wouldn't let me past him. I'd just gotten off the train, I was tired and irritated by the 4-hour journey, so I wasn't in the mood. He follows me until we get to an underpass before jumping in front of me. I want to get into the underpass and he won't let me, he's demanding money. Now the problem with chavs is they don't weigh much, and I've been doing martial arts for years, so I'm strong for a girl. The guy ends up on his bum as I push him out the way and keep walking. People around me just kind of look and carry on walking themselves. A friend of my cousin went to a Circle K in a small town and went to buy alcohol. He then went to the counter, they asked for ID so he could purchase, obviously. He showed them and then put them at weapon point and said he was robbing them. Stupidest kid ever, and he was mega caught. I think he's still in jail on several charges. This wasn't really a stupid criminal, more of a gentleman robber, I'd say. I went out at like 2 in the morning to buy cigs. I tried a few shops, but they were all closed. Walking home in sorrow, I was accosted by a young man with a knife who asked quite politely for all of my money. I was a very poor backpacker at the time, and the $50 in my pocket was pretty much the last of my money for the month. I showed the guy my empty wallet, hoping he'd leave it at that, but he noticed my bus pass and decided to take that instead. He then handed me 2 cigarettes and apologized for the inconvenience and walked away. In a state of semi-shock, I realized that without my bus pass, I had no way of getting the 5 a.m. bus to work, because of the damn Vancouver transport company, and I expressed my frustration out loud. The guy came back and asked me what was wrong. After I explained, he handed me back my bus pass and said, "Well, we've all got to make a living somehow." My favorite part is where he asks what's wrong. "Hey man, what's wrong?" "Oh, I just got robbed like 2 seconds ago." "Oh, jeez, I'm so sorry. Here, take this bus pass." A couple of people broke into my storage facility once. They cut through the fence and were going through units when they realized there was a camera mounted near them pointed right where they were standing. They panicked, covered their faces up, and decided to get rid of the camera. They climbed on something and started trying to tear the camera down. While they were doing this, there was nothing covering their faces anymore, and they were literally staring into the lens of the camera no more than 3 feet away. Guy comes into my store, purchases an item with a $100 bill, and I give him his change. He says, "That's not enough change," and reaches across the counter into the register drawer to try and grab back the 100 he gave me. So I slam the drawer in his fingers. The end. Cha-ching, motherfricker, except my drawer won't close. I once foiled a clever plan by an elderly guy at the department store I used to work at. He had a blazer with countless hidden pockets, and he was filling them with bottles of oil of Olay moisturizer. The loss prevention guy called me to help corner him. As he was leaving the door, he saw that I was looking at him and started to run. We ran after him, and he looked back at us. That's where he messed up. He tripped over his own feet and fell like a sack of potatoes. Most of the moisturizer bottles exploded, and he was lubed neck to knee. He smelled fantastic, though. You know, if he was spry enough to get up and start running again, I've got to wager it would be really hard to get a hold of him to properly stop him. And if he was elderly, all of that moisturizer might have had a nice de-aging effect on his skin, even if his hip was shattered by the fall. I had a drunk guy try to steal a bottle of vodka that we wouldn't sell him. He grabbed it off the poor cashier and just ran for the door. Fairly standard tactic. What he did, however, was stop in the door to taunt us with his brilliant scheme, literally turned in the door to stop and go, "Woo!" and gave us the finger. Whereupon he was hit in the chest by the security guard and Big Rab, the 6'5" guy who stocks the alcohol aisle. He managed to scramble away from them and down the car park ramp, however. It was a real shame because our car park ends in a 15-foot-high fence to stop people from climbing over it onto the railway tracks on the other side. Utter frickin' moron. His girlfriend didn't even wait with him, she just bought her stuff and left. This one actually happens a lot, but it happened to me one night several years ago during a graveyard shift. I was working alone on a Sunday night at the gas station. Now, this wasn't a bad area, but it wasn't great either, so the general manager figured that they didn't need 2 people watching the store. I disagreed with him, but I digress. I was in the back of the store mopping, doing my best to keep an eye out for people approaching the store so I could run back to the registers before they got inside. Anyway, I was mopping when a van suddenly pulls up in reverse to the store. Just as I start to put the mop aside, literally no more than 2 seconds afterwards, the doors to the back open up and 2 guys with sweaters tied around their heads jump out the back. They rush inside the store, yelling, run up to the counter, grab both of the teller machines and rip out the power cords, running out of the store with their loot and jumping in the back of the van. It speeds off and they hit the road. All of this happened in about 20 seconds and I just stood there and frickin' watched it. What these idiots didn't realize is that the frickin' machines are separated from the cash drawer for this very reason. They effectively made off with $0, but they did me a favor because I didn't have to work for the next 2 days, since the store couldn't operate until they got the new machines in. In short, idiot thieves stole inconsequential registers, thinking they were getting the money in the drawer under the counters with them. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Worked as a cashier for a grocery store. A customer came and placed a random assortment of things up on my register. Candy, soda, a couple of kids' toys, a pre-cooked chicken from the deli. She mentioned to me that she was from Oregon and would like the tax removed. We can do that in Washington state for customers from specific states. To do this, she had to give me her ID so I could record the info on it before removing the tax from the transaction. After giving her her total, she said she'd like to pay with a check. She was filling it out and I noticed it was pre-signed. I asked whose check they were and if they were available to come sign the check in front of me. She said they belonged to her mum who was in the car. When she left, I saw her get in the passenger seat of a van and leave, so I took down the license plate as they drove off. After this all happened, I called my floor manager over and told him what happened. We both shrugged and basically said, weird, leaving it at that. Later that day, the loss prevention guy calls me up the stairs, which is normally never a good thing. He tells me that I'd made a good catch because 2 women had been going around town with a stolen book of checks, and I was the reason the cops had an ID and a license plate to go after. In short, a lady gave me her ID to prove she deserved a 78-cent discount on goods she intended to pay for with stolen checks. I was summoned to court to tell this story to a judge. I work at my family's liquor store and we have a debit and credit card machine where we take the card, punch in our store ID, cashier ID, then the amount, stick the card in and then hand it back. This one fellow comes in and grabs a 6-pack from the cooler and comes to the counter. He was the only other person in the store besides a random guy in a corner going through wine. So I ring the 6-pack in and then I saw him grab it. He came up to the till and I asked him how he was doing and he said, fine, and I told him his total as he was just pulling up to the till and he mumbled something and reached into his coat and pulled out a gat, and placed it on the counter with the barrel facing me and slid it a few inches forward. Due to being used to people doing that with credit or debit cards, I just stretched out and grabbed the weapon with one hand and the debit machine in the other, automatically. He wasn't holding on to the weapon very firmly, so I just pulled it away, and then I realized I'd grabbed it and it was a GAT, not a credit card. So I froze with his weapon in my hand and the debit machine in the other. We looked each other in the eye, and then he bolted, leaving the shooter behind. I called my uncle and then the cops, who came and took a statement, and afterwards told me that the weapon was empty, so I wasn't in any real danger, but it's still one of the funniest things to ever happen to me. The level of non-committal to this crime really speaks of someone who didn't feel great about committing it. I wonder how desperate this guy was. It was sort of adorable how awkward and inept this went down in the end. Thanks for writing in. I work in a car audio store. This gangster wannabe shows up wanting us to install his amplifier right now. All of my installers are busy, and I tell him it isn't going to happen today, but we could probably do it tomorrow. He gets all upset and tells me his boy will install it himself, all he needs is the wires. I show him our amp kits, and he picks one out and pays with a credit card and shows me his ID, which is good. So the next thing I see is this fool grabbing a box with some entry-level 12-inch woofers and running out of the door and throwing the box into his ride and peeling out of our parking lot. The store was pretty crowded, and more than a few customers saw what just went down and asked if they could chase the guy down. I couldn't believe this idiot just paid with a credit card, and I checked his name and ID and it matched, so I had all the information I needed to have him arrested. But I said, oh, hell no. I just wrote up a ticket and manually punched the card for 3 times the amount, something like $585, instead of $170 for the thing he stole. The charge got approved and was never contested either. I hope he enjoys his speakers. Last week, I just left Qdoba when I saw a kid walk up to a skateboarder and attempt to steal his board. The first kid was followed by 2 of his friends, both of whom were shouting, "Hector, it's not your board, let it go!" Hector did not let go until the 5 cops who were in Qdoba came out and arrested him. They were parked outside. He was not a clever young lad. My dad was in a bank and some guy tried to rob the place. Dad noticed the guy's weapon and told him to shoot him. The guy wouldn't do it after constant demand by my dad and left the place. He'd tried to rob the place with a plastic weapon. Easy way to save the day. Good on you, Dad. Some creepy-looking guy tried to carjack me. I was leaving the supermarket at 8 in the morning on my way through Rotorua to go to Wellington. He knocks on my window and I roll it down about an inch. He asks if I can give him a ride to some gas station. I'm not too familiar with the place, so I ask where it is and he points up the road. Then he tells me I can just drop him at the corner of this street about 100 meters away. I laughed and told him to walk. Then he tried to force his way into my car, a 1973 Mercedes, so I opened the door as hard as I could into him and slammed it shut on his fingers. These doors weigh like 80 kilos. I know this because I had to take them off to fix some rust around the hinges. I do feel a bit bad for possibly breaking his fingers. My sister used to work at a bank in a Walmart, and her coworker had this somewhat older pickup truck, about 15 years old at the time of the story. It was pretty unremarkable in every way. Stock parts, stock stereo, average looking. Some idiot punched out the driver's side window and stole the CD player, which didn't play past track 7 on any given CD. Mind you, it was stock and also 15 years old. Instead of disconnecting the plugs like a normal thief, he cut all the wires, making it a stolen CD player that now required repair. He also bled all over the inside of the truck because he punched the window in and proceeded to wrap his hand up in one of the girl's spare work shirts. After taking the CD player, he then walks into Walmart and tries to steal a TV. Not one of the newer TVs that only weighs like 25 pounds, a big tube TV that weighs like 80. When he walked out, the alarm went off. He told the person at the door that it was a return and he was simply taking his old one back to his car. Keep in mind that he still had a bloody bank teller's polo wrapped around his hand that had an employee's name on it. An employee who was working at the store at that moment. Of course, the friend and the store pressed charges. The friend was also offered an appearance on one of those judge TV shows, but declined because the case was too stupid. For a daytime judge show. I have a weird take on this question because my Denny's was too inept to be robbed. A man walked in and went to the podium and cash stand. He said he had a weapon and wanted the money in the drawer. The first waitress sighed in disgust and said, "I'm not even on the register," and just walked away. The second waitress was standing nearby and looked at her husband, sitting in the nearest table, and mouthed, "Call the cops." And the husband says at regular volume, "I don't even have my cell phone on me." At this point, the robber decides that maybe this isn't the best route and begins to flee. They caught him about 1/10 of a mile away, on foot. Does anybody remember box tops? For those who don't, they're small squares on the tops of boxes of food that if you cut out and bring to an elementary school, that school gets 10 cents per box top. When I was young, still in elementary, a kid in my class stole the class's stash of box tops because he wanted the money for himself. So stupid. Not really a crime, but I figure it fits. This actually just happened to me this morning in my cab. Had a really young, snobby guy in the taxi, first year at university, I guess. He was pretty wasted and fairly nasty. Got to his parents' house in a decent area of town, and he had no money on him, so nipped inside to get some. Back and forward various times, still no money, all the time giving me a whole bunch of verbal abuse. Finally, he coughed up just over half the fare. "That'll have to do for you," he said. "You can call the police if you want, but I doubt they'd waste their time on chasing up a few extra pounds in a well-to-do middle-class area such as this. Go on, toddle on then." He added, motioning for me to leave. And I did. As I drove away, he stood triumphantly in his doorway, a broad smile on his face and his middle finger extended proudly in my direction, completely oblivious to the fact that minutes earlier he had handed his iPhone over as collateral. You can occasionally feel bad for some of these other criminals if they're resorting to their poorly orchestrated crimes out of desperation rather than a need to be a gangster, but these rich jerks who just feel entitled to other people's time without paying the proper due? Screw them. I hope you keep losing phones until you inherit a sense of decency, dude. I work part-time in a grocery store that's robbed all of the gosh darn time. Like seriously, once or twice every month. It's got to the point where now I just laugh every time I arrive at work to see the store has been broken into again. One particular night, just before we were beginning to close, a brazen robber runs into the store who appears to be no older than 20 with a cricket bat and nervously demands the money from the register. The clerk obeys and gives the man just under $200. The reward hardly seems proportional to the potential ramifications. At this point, the customers at the front end are backing away and the man attempts to make an escape. As he breaks for the door, while I'm standing in an adjacent aisle where the soup pleasantly happened to be shelved, I grabbed a big old can of tomato soup and gave it a friendly toss in the vicinity of his face. K.O. Slam dunk, hole in one. He takes a comical fall into the flower display in a glorious explosion of flowers and water. Then, every male customer jumps on the jerk and pins him down until the cops arrive. In short, I threw a can of soup at a robber and became a superhero. So I worked at a restaurant a few years back. I used to work behind the bar every once in a while. This guy was up there buying drink after drink, probably got his tab up to about $65. I remember the guy getting up. I figured he was going to the bathroom or something, but he just never came back. About an hour or so after that, a busboy found a wallet on the ground right under the seat he was sitting at. I take out the license to see if it was the guy, and it was. I saw a credit card in there, and I charged it. He still hasn't returned for the wallet. When did you have to look after an absolute demon child? I babysat all through junior high and high school to make my spending money. The worst was a referral for the friends of a family that I babysat for all the time. This new family had 2 twin boys who were 8 and a little boy who was just starting her toilet training. The kids were very nice during the introductions, but it soon turned out they were hyper as heck as soon as their parents left. The boys whooped and hollered and chased each other through the house. I convinced them to play Legos or whatever in their room to keep them quiet because I had to deal with the little girl who needed to potty. She kept trying to go number 2 in her little training potty, but it wasn't happening. Then I heard the boys screaming at the top of their lungs, so I left her on her potty to find out why the boys were freaking out. The boys' bedroom had 2 single beds. Each boy was standing on his bed, peeing at the other one like they were having a pee-pee duel. They got urine everywhere, on the walls, the carpets, the sheets, and of course, all over each other. So I was ticked off at these kids and told them to change their clothes and strip the sheets. They just keep laughing at me and make me chase them around the house like it's a funny game to be soaked in pee. Meanwhile, the little girl, who wasn't wearing any pants or undies, drags her potty into the kitchen, singing at the top of her lungs about how she's pooped now and wants me to look. When one of the boys runs through the kitchen, he accidentally overturns the potty and stuff gets all over the linoleum. As much as I wanted to cry from utter frustration, I managed to hold my temper and calm them all down enough while I cleaned up as best as I could. Which is tough when it isn't your house and you have no idea where they keep all their cleaning supplies. When the parents finally came home, they didn't offer any apologies for how their kids behaved or any extra tip or anything like that. Needless to say, that was the first and last time I ever babysat for that family. I hope those gross little boys smelled wee-wee on their mattresses forever afterwards. And by the way, this was back before everyone had cell phones, so calling the parents to come home immediately wasn't really a good option. It would have involved calling a movie theater or whatever to track them down when I didn't even know what film they were seeing, or even know if they'd finished eating dinner out yet. Unless the kids were dying, I couldn't call the parents. I'm rather proud of my 14-year-old self for being a trooper and sticking it out rather than just giving up. Plus, it was pee and poop. I'd changed diapers and cleaned up after pets before. I got the sense when they hired me that they had a really hard time finding a permanent sitter. They hoped I could be on a regular schedule for them like I had with their friends. That should have been a red flag. They called me a few times after that night, but I always told them I was booked. I should have been honest about the reason why, but I didn't want them to badmouth me to everyone else in the neighborhood. Parents never want to hear their kids are anything but perfect angels. Haha. Well, as gross as that sounds, I do wonder if these kids were really that bad all the time or if the acting out was a thing because the sitter was there. But yeah, the parents probably owed you an apology at the very least. The little girl didn't seem that bad. I think most of her antics can just really be put down to her being very young. I babysat one who climbed out of his bedroom onto the roof of his house and started the house on fire. That kid was a demon. He was 9 at the time. I called the fire department and got all 3 kids out of the house. Luckily, the fire station was a few blocks away, so they were there and put it out before it really got going. It was just smoldering. I was about 16 at the time and I was very much in demand as a babysitter. I was also no nonsense, which I made clear to the parents. I was given permission to give the kids a whack on the bum if I needed to. This was the 60s, of course. But this particular kid was beyond even that. I lived on the block 4 houses down with my parents and 8 siblings. I continued to sit for them because they paid me a lot of money, especially after that, and they couldn't get anyone else to do it for some reason. They eventually moved to a mansion in a very wealthy neighborhood because the dad was made VP of the company he worked for, and they still drove about 10 miles each way to get me to watch their kids. I'm still in touch with his sister who lives in Atlanta. I always thought he'd end up in prison, but surprisingly, he's a fireman. I'm not technically a babysitter, but for a few months I had to babysit my husband's nieces and nephews. Those kids are awful. Their parents neglect them, and it shows. Here's a few highlights. I rescued a 2-week-old kitten, nursed him back to health, and adopted him. One day while I was doing dishes, the 2 youngest took him outside and tried to drown him in the above-ground pool. Twice. He survived. My in-laws' house was also filthy and roach-infested. While one of the kids was eating dinner, a roach apparently crawled across his plate and he started hysterically crying. I went to calm him down and one of the others ran into the kitchen, opened every spice she could get her hands on and dumped them all over the place. I decide I have to keep the 2 smaller ones with me at all times due to their antics. I put them on the kitchen counter to help me cook, and they actually start behaving, and I thought I'd found a successful method in handling them. I was wrong. One asks me a question while the other one takes out glasses from the cupboard and starts smashing them on the ground. I go to stop her, and then the other one starts smashing plates. The 2 oldest were sisters, and they hated each other. They got into a fight over the TV, it could have been the Xbox, I can't remember, and then the older one started chasing after the older sister, and eventually smashes the younger sister's fingers in the bathroom door. While that sister is crying, the older one is laughing maniacally the whole time. And that's just a few stories. There are others that make me so grateful to have moved away from all of them. I used to babysit the 2 boys of a family while their parents went out once every few weeks to get some alone time. I'd looked after them before and they were usually well behaved and listened very well. This family had a few cats and they'd climb all sorts of odd places such as in sinks, bookshelves, cupboards, stuff like that. Well, this one night I guess they'd left the dryer door open and when one of the kids went downstairs to get his ball hockey gear, I guess he closed the door on the cat and started the dryer. I was already outside waiting at this point, so I heard nothing about this until we came back inside and I noticed a dryer was on. I asked the kids why it was on and they said their mum was doing laundry. I knew for a fact it was turned off when after the parents left, so I went to investigate it and opened it to a completely burned and mangled cat that was essentially twisted like a pretzel. I told the parents what had happened and that their kid was a psychopath and needs help now because he's clearly not right in the head. Never babysat anyone's kids ever again. The parents were in shock. They didn't blame me or get mad, just shocked that one of their kids murdered their cat like that. It still makes me uncomfortable to think about him. Maybe this following story is why I'm scared to have little boys. I babysat for a few families on my street as a preteen. Word of mouth spread and a family maybe 6 streets away asked me to watch 3 kids. 3 kids seemed like a lot for not knowing them, but they said they'd only be gone for a few hours. The parents leave, and the kids turn into demon spawn. 2 little boys and 1 youngest child girl. They tormented her until she was literally hiding and clinging to my legs and clothes. I turned on a movie and they were okay for like 1 minute. Then one boy gets up and pulls his pants down and literally just starts whittling in the middle of the living room. He was totally potty trained too, he was like 6. I freaked out and started to clean it up and sent the boy to his room. The other brother followed him, as they shared a room, and just sat in there with him. The girl snuck downstairs through all of this and, unbeknownst to me, starts making an F5 grade mess. After I clean the pee, I go to get them out of the boy's room. Surprise, the door is closed. Oh, and apparently locked. The one boy is only like 3, and is crying because he can't open it and his brother won't let him out. The older boy is defiant and just screaming at me, "No, I'm not opening it. You're not my mom. I want my mummy." We had a standoff for a few minutes before I realized the girl was gone. Well, I wasn't getting the boys out, so I went to get the phone and called the parents while I tried to find the girl. She had pulled out all of her fricking toys and they were everywhere, and I couldn't find her because she was in like a pillow pile somewhere. I don't really have an ending to the story, but needless to say, I was pretty much in tears by the time they came home. One of them drove me back and kept apologizing and hoped that I'd still give them another chance. That didn't happen. Also, this was probably like 15 years ago now. I was maybe 14 tops at the time. I didn't have the mental capacity to know what to do or how to handle any of this. And yeah, I was paid maybe $5 to $7 an hour. It was awful and scarred me from babysitting for a while. What is it with the small boys in these stories and just letting their bladders loose the second their parents are gone? Like, I was obsessed with farts at that age, but I had no interest in covering the place I lived in with pee-pee. Just like the first story. At least these parents apologized. I am a full-time nanny and have been for the past 5 years, but in childcare for the past 12. I'm primarily a nanny of multiples ranging from twins to quadruplets. Now, with that being said, you'd think I'd run across a handful of demon children, which I have, but dear lord, it's the parents that are the demons on more than one occasion. The one in particular that comes to mind saying this, I started with a morning family that I found through care.com after my regular family shortened my hours to afternoons only. When I first interviewed, the mum was notably odd, very in touch with emotions, and very particular about food. She stated that she wanted me from 7 to 12, Monday through Friday, for her 5-year-old son and 3-year-old son while she either ran errands or worked from home. Not too weird too far, but then she asked me what my parenting style was. I told her that my style was whatever hers was. I'm perfectly fine altering my nannying style to fit each individual family's needs. She told me she was wanting the answer of what I was going to do when I was a parent, not in nannying. I told her my philosophy: be kind, be consistent, timeouts for bad behavior, stuff like that. She then told me hers. We don't tell our children no, we don't take their toys away, we don't do timeouts, and we don't spank. Okay, I agree with that last one at least. So to say the least, I was confused about how the heck they run their household. Pretty much, she believed that each child had this emotional backpack where they store their feelings, and they need to express them constantly. She also mentioned to me that both of her children sleep in her bed. All well and good, but here's how her children acted with it once I was hired. I asked the 3-year-old, still in diapers, to lay down so I could change him. He refused, so I gave him a warning that I was going to pick him up and lay him down to change him. He then ran off to his mother, screaming and crying. I told her why he was crying, and this is what she had said. "Did Brittany do something to upset you? You just go ahead and cry, I'll hold you." Then once he was done with his tantrum, she said, "I'm so proud of you for getting all of those big feelings out." No, your child threw a tantrum because he didn't want his butt changed. He doesn't need praise for that. The 5-year-old was very independent, very smart, and very OCD. At one point, his brother and I were coloring. Now, as normal 3-year-olds do, he was scribbling. His brother came in and started taunting his brother and telling him he was doing everything wrong. I told the older brother, "Your brother is trying to express his creativity. Let's encourage him rather than criticize him." The 5-year-old bursts into tears and runs to his mother, and he has the biggest wail about this, to which the mother responds basically the same way she did about the kid needing his nappy changed. The 5-year-old was mad at his mother one time because she told him to get dressed. He came up, hit her across the face while screaming, and she just let him. She kept praising him for getting his big feelings out. He's still hitting her, so she takes him to the shower, turns the water on both of them, fully clothed by the way, and tries to get him to calm down. So, besides those incidents, I can't get either child to do anything, especially with the mother around. After a few weeks, she introduced me to more rules and more expectations. She wanted me to have a schedule with them and wanted me to do some homeschooling. No big deal, I get it. But then anytime I told them it was for blah blah blah, she'd swoop in and say they could just play instead. Like the children just woke up that morning and I told them to brush their teeth. They said they wanted to play and the mum negotiated with them by asking them if that's what they thought they felt they needed to do. Like no matter what I or the mother said it was time to do, as long as the kid felt like he didn't need to do said thing, then he didn't need to do so. At one point, even, the mum and I took the kids to the library. I told her we needed to finish up soon because I needed to get going to my other job. We got to the car, and because the 5-year-old didn't feel like getting in the car, she let him stand outside for 25 minutes before he felt like getting in the car, resulting in me being late for my next job. She was also really strange with food too. She was one of those people who legitimately treated organic food as a religion. These were her own words, by the way. She had a number system for food, 1 to 5. The only thing listed as number 1, as in completely healthy, was a vitamin called chwanprash. Even fruits and vegetables were labeled as 2. Salads and healthy food? 3. Bread? 4. And anything sweet was number 5. The thing is, she classified anything that wasn't 1 or 2 to be unhealthy. So these children thought a simple salad or anything normal was bad for them, so they wouldn't eat it. And anytime they did have any sweets, they'd go frickin' nuts over wanting more because she deprived them of everything. They'd have full-day tantrums because of it. And my last note is that she didn't allow any electronics in the bedroom, not even an alarm clock. So this meant I had to wait every single day in the cold, ringing the doorbell constantly, sometimes up to 45 minutes, for them to come answer the door. Needless to say, I quit within 2 months. It was utterly ridiculous. At the end of it, she asked me to review her family and children. She asked me the pros and cons. She was very shocked to hear that the only pro I listed was that the children had a very good vocabulary. In short, despite nannying for many years, it's the parents that are always more demonic than the children. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend babysat a kid with Pika. Had to follow him around everywhere yelling, "No, don't eat that." Kind of like having a new puppy. Ended the night watching him chew on her flip-flop while it was on her foot. Kid threw an easy bake oven at me and then tried to lock me in a closet. This is way funnier than it should be. I'd say a bunch of the things we've read up to now could honestly be put down to bad parenting, having no boundaries up until the story, or the kids being young and curious, or just being wired differently. This thing with the easy bake might be the first thing I've read that seems to be legitimately malicious. Although the cat in the dryer might also qualify if we knew more about that kid. Not so much a nightmare, but it was an odd night. I was in my senior year of college and picked up an occasional babysitting gig from care.com. The family is well-to-do, awesome people in a hella good part of town, and the kids are between 8 and 12, so really I'm just there to make sure no one burns the nice house to the ground. With that being said, the younger one, who we'll call Adam, was definitely on the spectrum. I head over one night and the parents call Adam down. I notice he's just in his tighty-whities, which is how he slept, and he seems totally frickin' out of it. The parents ask him to tell me what had happened. When he's too incoherent to tell me, they finally blurt out that he had his tonsils taken out like 48 hours ago. Oh, okay, awesome. Thanks for the heads up, but I guess this is what I'm dealing with. So anyway, Adam goes back to bed and I don't hear anything out of him for like the next 5 hours because the little guy is riding high as frick on pain meds. I check up on him a few times. We're good, whatever. It's now about 10 or 11 at night and I hear him come down the stairs and he's holding a stuffed animal Bowser. I say, "Hey buddy, how you feeling?" Adam says nothing. "What you doing, Adam?" He silently walks into the kitchen. "Adam, do you want something to eat?" He opens the freezer in total silence still. "Why don't you let me help you, Adam?" To remind you, this kid is in nothing but his undies and holding a stuffed animal. He finally acknowledges my presence and looks me straight in the eyes and then gargles. "Bowser hungry." It still cracks me up thinking about it. In short, the kid is high as a kite, gets the munchies but can't communicate very well due to pain meds and recently removed tonsils. I had one main family I regularly babysat for after college, and they recommended me to a friend of theirs who had 2 girls. Both families were well off, but very different. Anyway, the second family's 2 girls were beyond spoiled. I mean reality TV show spoiled. The youngest, who was 5, would blood-curdle scream for a good 15 minutes running through his mansion house when it was time for bed. I always felt like a jerk calling the mother, but they didn't pay me enough to put up with that bullcrap. I'd have to set the girl up in the special room and rub her back while she fell asleep after she spoke to her mother. I sat for them 3 times and avoided their calls after that. I babysat 2 kids throughout the school year and multiple days in the summer when I was in high school. I was pretty much a 9-to-5 nanny when not in school. I really loved those kids, which is surprising, considering the first time I babysat them all day, it all went to hell. The older sibling was a boy in my cousin's grade, and the younger one a little girl. They were maybe 6 or 7 and 3 and 4 respectively at this point. I'd babysat once or twice before, but never a whole day by myself. I don't know what started the incident, but the kids began to fight. Before I could break it up, the little girl threw a heavy, pointy metal toy plane at her brother. It hit him right in the corner of his eye, barely missing his actual eyeball. He started gushing blood everywhere, all over his clothes, all over the expensive Disney Store Winnie the Pooh blanket his sister had been walking around with, all over the pristine white carpet. He freaks out and starts crying, asking me if he's dying. Hardcore, terrified kid sobs. I rush into action and usher him to the bathroom and get a cold washcloth. I had to coax his hands away from his face so I could see what I was dealing with, and eventually I get the blood wiped away and see it's a very small cut. I have him hold the cold washcloth to his eye and I work on calming him down. The bleeding stops, I get him into fresh PJs and send him to his bed to lie down for a few minutes since he'd worn himself out at that point. That's when I realized that I haven't seen his sister in about 10 to 15 minutes. I got sidetracked with the bleeding, panicking kid and now I have no idea where the culprit is. I ran around inside the house and checked all of the doors and locks. Still locked, so I know she's at least inside. I'm fighting back tears and running around the house shouting her name, trying to find her. I go back to her brother's room deciding that I need to get his help, and that's when I hear it. Little sniffles and quiet hiccups from behind his bedroom door. She was a small child and had hidden behind the door fearing that she was in trouble and that I was going to whack her. I didn't, of course. So now I'm comforting her but also telling her that hurting her brother and hiding from me isn't okay. I'm completely drained and wigged out at this point, so I have the kids go to the living room with me and sit them at opposite ends of the couch. I put on a kid's film and get to work cleaning up the blood from the carpet and floor. Then I sit at the kitchen table, open concept so I can see them, and quietly try to calm myself down so I don't throw up all over myself. I'm really proud I got the bloodstains out of the carpet though. I had a 5-year-old pull out a pocket knife on me and demand I give him my Pokemon cards. Aha! That child attended the video game school of how to get what you want, I guess. Classic Elder Scrolls protagonist material right there. Also, I'm curious as to whether the knife was the property of that kid or not. I had a kid go to the bathroom, go number 2, run out with no pants, no wiping, grab my house key and throw it in said mess. When I fished it out, he sat on the couch rubbing his butt. I used every kind of soap on that key. When his parents got back, I waited to get paid. Then I explained things, pointing to the spot on the couch, and I left. I had a kid who was literally the embodiment of Cartman from South Park. He fried his pet rat and tried to eat it. I wasn't there when it happened, but when his parents told me, I made sure to never see that devil again. I was 14 years old and my mum's friend calls with an emergency. Her normal babysitter backed out on her last minute, so she asked if I could sit her 8-year-old son, who's quite far along the spectrum, for a few hours. Sure, I say, why not? So I get to the house and the kid wants to watch some cartoons. So we watch cartoons. Then he gets bored and wants to play hide and seek. I tell him to go hide and I'll come look for him soon. I continue to watch cartoons for 10 more minutes before I realize I should probably be looking for him. Now, I was on the bottom level and they had one of those split-level houses where you walk in the front door and you can either go upstairs or downstairs. So I start walking up the stairs yelling, "Gregory, where are you?" You know, the usual. So I get to the foyer landing in the middle and this kid slides out from the hallway to the top of the stairs, Tom Cruise risky business style, except he's completely in the buck and he screams, "You scared my pants off!" Now, this kid is fairly large, weight and height-wise. This was also the first male member I'd ever seen. I was immediately scarred for life, called my mum, explained the situation and that I wasn't fit to babysit anymore. She came and took over and I walked home and sat in silence for a while. I have never babysat again since then. When did you verbally destroy someone you didn't know for their horrible behavior? So I went to Subway yesterday to get one of those delicious $5 footlongs. Upon arrival, I saw 3 girls, probably all about 17 or 18. The first 2 order, and the server asks the last girl what toppings she wants. She's on her phone, so she doesn't answer. The server asks her again, not being impatient or rude, just asks. And the girl snapped, "Can't you see I'm on the phone here? God, you're so rude. Just wait till I'm done." I was so offended and embarrassed for her server, so I couldn't help but say something to her. That was extremely rude. You came here to get a sub, don't yell at her for providing the service you asked for. Just get off your phone, order your toppings, and stop acting like a child. She looked at me with contempt and anger, but I think I intimidated her, so she didn't say anything back to me. The server looked at me, smiled, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." One of my customers where I used to work, this guy was being absurdly rude to me and my coworker. I'd already told him quite clearly that there was a line, and he'd be waiting in it in the order he came in. This was a high-end store at Christmas time, so the sense of entitlement is a little bit too common. He called my manager an idiot after having to re-ring something. Another customer behind him, and half his size, taps him on the shoulder and says loudly, "Would you mind shutting the frick up and letting these people do their jobs? You're seriously teeing us all off." The bigger guy threatens him, and the smaller guy goes, "If you were as tough as you like to think you are, you wouldn't have to be such a prick. Just shut the frick up." I magically found a 50% off coupon for my new favorite person. My buddy and I were at a movie, and these guys who were just talking about how they'd got out of basic training were bashing the movie and laughing, making rude comments, stuff like that. Well, my buddy tells them to pipe the frick down, and they flip him off, but they do quiet down. After the movie, we're at the front of the pack, right behind the 6 or 7 guys who were being rude, and my buddy says, "That was really rude to everyone, how are you behaving?" And one of them, the loudest, whips out his military ID and says, "Yeah, well, I'm a fricking Marine and I fight for your freedoms, idiot." My buddy, who just happens to be an officer, whips out his ID and says, "And I'm a Marine officer, and just because you have the honor of wearing a uniform, it doesn't give you the right to be a crap-spewing child." Then he made them stand at attention right at the door of the movie theater and apologized to every patron exiting. My money is on those idiots never actually seeing any action and yet busting their entitlement out on everyone they see anyway. Some people really do just sign up for the credit and status rather than out of a drive to do anything good. I used to work in the toy department of a retail store. The Leapfrog laptop had just come out and they were really expensive. So I was straightening shelves and I noticed a kid just wailing away on one of these laptops. Their mum is nowhere to be found. I approached the kid and asked him nicely, "Is that how you play with your toys at home?" The kid gave me a sheepish, "No," and placed it back on the shelf. I was feeling pretty good about myself at that point when the kid's mum came out of nowhere and very rudely told me that I had no right to speak to her child that way. I calmly looked this poor excuse for a mother in the eye and said, "Ma'am, your son was about to break a $150 toy. Our store has a you break it, you buy it policy. If you would like me to give it back to him so he can continue hitting it, I'd be happy to ring you up at my register for the damages." She then proceeded to give me an eat crap and die look, grabbed her son, and stalked off. In college, my friends and I were sitting at a table, and behind us was a kid sitting by himself. I'll admit, he looked a little bit like a cliché D-bag. Popped collar, gelled hair, super tan, all the stuff. A group of kids in the same area had been laughing and talking loudly about his general fashion sense for a while now, though. Eventually, one of the girls got up, walked over, and proclaimed loudly, "I'm sorry, but I have to help you out because you look like a total—" She used a slur for a gay person. Then she pulled his collar down. The kid sat there in disbelief as she walked away and his eyes started welling up. I was infuriated and walked over to her table. In the most conversational tone I could muster, I said, "Oh hey, do you know that guy?" She said she didn't, and then the scolding began. "So you just thought it would be appropriate to demean a complete stranger in public to look like a frickin' cool kid in front of all of your friends. I hope you feel better and that you all got a good laugh at his expense. Maybe next time you can pause to reflect before you're a total butthole." I then walked over to the table and invited the kid to sit with me and my friends. Turns out he was gay, had just transferred to the college, and didn't know anyone. I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, so I sympathize with other teenage fast food workers. A while ago, I was in the local McDonald's where I used to work, and it was apparent that it was the cashier's first day working there, but he seemed to be doing okay. He entered something wrong, though, and asked his manager to fix it, and the manager came over and started tearing into him in front of all the customers, calling him a fricking idiot and an inbred monkey, and so on and so forth. After I received my order at the counter, I asked the manager to come over and told him, "Please do not talk to that cashier that way ever again. Just because you're a day shift manager at a McDonald's, it doesn't make you a superior human being, and it gives you no right to treat others, especially your employees, like dirt." After I sat down, the other manager came over and brought me some apple pies and thanked me for standing up to that guy. Apparently he acted that way towards everyone. Back in college, there was a mentally challenged guy who worked in the dorm dining hall. He obviously had some problems, but was with it enough to hold down the job, remember certain students, carry on conversations, stuff like that. One day I was behind some girls in line who were standing right in front of him talking about how they didn't like being served by a, quote, retard, and so on and so forth. I said, "He has ears and he can hear you. He's a person just like the rest of us and you shouldn't treat people like that." They called me the B word and walked away. I'm a student in a culinary arts program. We rotate through stations and run a full operation-sized cafeteria on the university campus. One of the stations, desserts, requires that you serve and plate in front of the customer. I was helping this one woman, and another guy who comes in every day and is the worst customer I've ever dealt with, budged in front of her and reached for the dessert that I was still plating. The customer says loudly, "Excuse me, that's mine. She's not done and you can wait and not be so rude. You're unbelievable." He walked away with an unhappy, childish look on his face. She looked at me and said, "Sorry, I can't stand rude people." I couldn't have been more grateful. In short, had a customer stand up for me against a really rude regular. I'm a pretty mellow guy who travels for a living. I don't really let the small things get to me. A couple of years ago, I was on a flight that was already running 30 minutes late. I was really thinking to myself that the connection was going to be tight, most likely involving running or a brisk walk for a mile or so through ATL. I was one of the last to board the plane, and I had to check my bag since there was no more room. The 4 or 5 people behind did the same thing. What are you going to do? Well, I worked my way down the aisle, and there was a guy there asking people to shift their bags or move stuff that definitely wasn't moving. He was trying to get his oversized bag to fit, and there was just no place for it. He called for the flight attendant, who walked up and says, "Sir, we're out of room. We'll have to check your bag." Well, that was it for him. He went off on her, started yelling, "This airline sucks. I'm a million-mile member. I want your employee number and name," so on and so forth. At that point, I pretty much mentally snapped. I felt horrible for the flight attendant who was just doing her job, and this guy spent 5 minutes making a butthead out of himself and burning up time that we could have been airborne in. People were gawking, looking away, cringing, and overall just hoping he'd stop so that they could move on. I just yelled, "Shut up! Shut the hell up!" At this point I was shaking with anger, and then I went off. "Take your bag to the front of the plane, check it, and stop with this insanity. You are what is wrong with air travel. Your sense of entitlement makes me want to puke. If you're a million-mile flyer, you know the rules of flying. You know how this works. Why punish everyone else on this flight? You've insulted this lovely flight attendant, and you've made everyone on this plane uncomfortable with your little show, and I'm now another 5 minutes late for my connection. I want you and your little Napoleon complex issues," he was about 5'5", "to shut up and sit down. Do we have a problem?" He started spluttering and looking all flustered, but didn't say a single word. Somebody at the back of the plane started clapping, and soon the whole cabin was applauding me. I just sat down and waited while everyone clapped, and this guy took a long walk of shame to the front of the plane and back. The flight attendant thanked me, and so did everyone else. I didn't mean to do it, but I just can't stand people like that. The best part was I had free drinks for the flight. The flight attendant gave me a stack of free drink cards for my next couple of flights, and one of the passengers gave me a voucher for free Wi-Fi that he'd won. It was very satisfying. This one is straining the edge of plausibility a little bit for the narrator, but I do hope that it happened. In my experience, entitled people generally feel completely justified and have no problem arguing that they should be given special treatment for some reason or other, if they don't resort to tough guy crap. But it's not impossible, and it's the kind of thing people would clap for, so here's hoping. I have worked at Chili's for about 5 years now. There have been so many experiences with rude people that I've lost count, but this was the worst one by far. I'm waiting tables about this time of year, graduation time, and I've got a party of 25 call ahead at about 7, and they say they'll be arriving in 30 minutes. We set the table up for them and were anticipating their arrival. They actually ended up showing up about an hour and a half later than they said they would. We'd since broken up the big table and set other smaller parties there. They arrived and were angry that their table wasn't ready for them, and the really soft-spoken, sweet host that was working that night simply explained to them that they thought they'd chosen somewhere else to go since they hadn't come sooner. The lady that was speaking to the host immediately burst out saying that we should have known they were still coming, and that she knew Chili's was a terrible idea and that we're all awful at our jobs. The host, almost in tears, says that she'll set up another table for them in a closed section and that I'll be taking care of them. I should also mention these same people come in all the time. They're rude to everyone and never tip and always complain so that they can get free food. When I wait on large parties by myself, I always start everyone out with a water just because it takes a little bit to get everyone's drink order and get it out to them, and I figure it's better at least to have some water available while you're waiting. As soon as we get them settled in, several of them start complaining that they don't want water, and I was rude to not offer them a different option. I simply explained to them that I'll be bringing them whatever they'd like and that the water was just to hold them for the time being. They proceed to tell me that I'm an idiot and tell me to get this mess out of my face, referring to the water. Most of them start ordering strawberry lemonade. I make all of the drinks and bring them out to them. People then start to complain that this is really nasty. They tell me it doesn't taste anything like it did last time, and I tell them that we make it by measurement every time. But I'd be glad to make a new batch for them. I go and pour out what we had and make another batch of the strawberry lemonade and take it out to them again. And they again complain that it's nasty. I offer to get them something else and they just say, "We want a waiter that isn't an idiot and knows how to make strawberry lemonade." I go get the manager to explain that we make it the same way every time, and they roll their eyes and tell the manager that I was being rude to them. Fast forward to when they're eating their meal, they start being really rude to me again. They started pouring their drinks out on the floor on purpose, throwing food, and insulting me right in front of my face. I had a couple of other tables that complained that this huge party is being extremely loud, which they were. I went over and asked if they minded being a little quieter, as it was disturbing the other tables in the restaurant. One kid then yells, "Oh, you think I'm too loud, punk?" And they all start being even louder than before, and some tables got up and left. That was the final straw. I yelled over them and told them they're no longer welcome at our restaurant. That shut them up. One kid told me that I couldn't do that, and I said, "When you start causing our other good-paying customers to leave, I can do what I want. Now get out." They had the nerve to ask for boxes for their food, which they hadn't touched because they were too busy being loud. I told them that I could care less if they wanted their food and that they needed to leave. My manager and I stood at the door smiling, watching them all walk out. One girl told me I ruined her graduation party. I informed her that she had no class and got what she deserved. A few of them stayed and talked to my manager, begging him to allow them back because it was their favorite place to eat. He told them that they cost the company money when they came in and that they were never welcome back. I haven't seen them since. 100% improvement. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad was driving around with his terminally ill friend. They needed to go to a pharmacy, and seeing as how my dad's friend gets short of breath easily, they were hoping for a handicap spot. Unfortunately, none were vacant, so they had to park farther away. A squat, muscular man comes walking out of the pharmacy and starts to open the door of his Ford F-150 parked in a handicap spot that he clearly didn't need to be in, nor did he have a sticker. My friend's dad called out to him as he was getting in, "Excuse me? Yeah? Is your handicap physical or mental?" The guy's face went white as a ghost and he quickly got into his truck and pulled away. I was at the grocery store on my lunch break. This older woman, who had some obvious mental and emotional problems, was walking up to a checkout. She went to take her salad out and it opened up and just went everywhere. So she starts crying and saying how she can't afford to buy another salad and apologizing for the mess. A clerk and I went over and started helping her. The clerk tells her it happens all the time and that they won't charge her, but the woman was still visibly upset and continued apologizing and crying. Then I hear two 40 to 45-year-old women, with their hair all done up, expensive clothes, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, giggling and having little laughing outbursts every time the old lady says something. I was appalled, but whatever. To my amazement, they start openly mocking her loud enough that we could all hear and flat out laughing at her. At this point, I stood up, grabbed my basket, walked over near them and quietly said, "Come on, quit it." They both stop laughing and get beet red with anger. One of them then says, "Excuse me, who the frick are you?" I calmly replied, "It takes a lot of time for me to get mad. She's obviously upset, she can hear you over here, and it's embarrassing for you and her." That's when they both lose it, saying, "Who the frick are you? Who the frick do you think you are? Don't ever talk to me like that," etc. To which I replied, "Listen, I know you're both really unhappy because you married a man for money and now he's cheating on you with much younger women, and your kids probably don't respect or like you because you're obviously crappy people, but you don't have to be mean to strangers. If you want to laugh, whatever, but don't start mocking people. Try to contain yourselves and act like the adults you've never had to become." They were shocked. It was really funny. They said, "We're not paying for this," and just walked out, leaving their food behind. Then the checkout clerk just started laughing, and the guy behind me went, "Frick yeah." I kinda think I did a bit of an overkill, but I was really shocked at how mean they were being. This one I find easier to believe because these people actually refused to believe they were wrong or to learn anything. And yes, it was a bit of an overkill, but honestly, if you're going to laugh openly at a struggling person that way, then you deserve anything that's coming to you. Went to see the Wolverine movie in a really big theater. About halfway up the row of seats, it had an aisle that cut across horizontally from one side of the theater to the other. Some butthead father was there with a toddler, and he let that kid run back and forth across the aisle, squealing the whole time. I put up with it for about 30 minutes, and then finally went down to the father and said, "Do you realize the entire theater can hear your child and that it's ruining the movie for the rest of us? Please make him be quiet." The father stared at me in complete shock, as if the concept had never crossed his mind. He left immediately with his kid. Several people around me said thank you as I sat down. One time I was at a show in Philly. It was in between bands, and everyone was milling around outside the venue. As I was standing talking to some friends, I noticed 5 or 6 wannabe hardcore kids harassing this homeless guy. They were kind of pushing him around, forcing him to take pictures with them and talking down to him. Eventually, the guy slumps down on a wall, pulling his knees up and starts crying as these guys are degrading him more and more. One of them shoves his camera phone in the guy's face, saying he's going to make him famous on YouTube. At this point, I've seen and heard enough and I just lose it. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember flipping on these guys for about 5 minutes, along the lines of how that guy has nothing and you have everything compared to him, yet you're worthless. How disgusting what they were doing was, how sad and pathetic they were. I didn't care that it was 5 or 6 guys who could probably together beat my face in. I knew there was no threat towards the end of my tirade when they were all staring at the ground, red in the face, clearly ashamed of what they did. As my verbal berating ended, I was greeted to applause from everywhere. I helped the old guy up and took him to Wawa and bought him some dinner. He was weeping on the way there, thanking me, saying he'd never had anyone stick up for him his entire life, and how I came out of nowhere to help him. It felt good, man. I was helping my grandparents run errands one day, and while my grandfather, who was injured during test fire in France during the war, he had stood up to get out of the store mechanized wheelchair so that he could use the ATM, some 19-year-old thug walked up and sat down in it. I gave him 3 polite versions of, "He's using that," before he responded, "Chill out, I'll get up in a minute." I started to explain that I wanted the chair available in case he lost his balance or anything, then thought better of it, instead staring homeboy in the eyes with a deadpan, "Get up, mother fricker." To which the guy responded with a, "Who do you think you're talking to?" I told him, "I'm talking to you, mother fricker, get up now." He responded with, "Who you talking to?" again. Note that if the person isn't scared of you the first time you say it, it's just going to make you look dumb. At this point, he still hadn't gotten up, so I rushed the cart, fully intending to flip it over, and when homie saw that I was serious, he jumped up and started muttering about how I'd better hope he never saw me again. As a side note, my grandfather was 91 and looks just like Jimmy Carter, except maybe a little more unassuming, and I don't think I've ever seen him prouder than he was at that moment. In college, for a Spanish class I was taking, I had the opportunity to see a foreign film for extra credit. I had to take notes during the film, so I could write a brief summary of the movie to turn into my Spanish professor. The movie was playing in one of our big lecture halls by the Foreign Film Club at my school, so there were a lot of students there watching. I get to my seat, settle in, and start watching the movie. About 10 minutes in, 2 girls enter the hall and proceed to make a lot of noise like nothing is going on at all. They take their seats in my same row, but on the other side of the aisle. They continue talking for the next 10 to 15 minutes loudly while the movie is playing, not giving any Fs. I can tell people around me are annoyed with subtle ahem and groans and multiple head turns to look at the girls, but no one really does anything and the girls keep talking. Finally, I've had it. I get up and walk over to the girls and ask them in the most polite voice I could muster, as I was very annoyed, "Please excuse me, ladies, for interrupting your conversation. Would you mind shutting the frick up so the rest of us can watch the film?" I just stood there and they got very angry and left. The entire lecture hall applauded and the movie went on. There were no more interruptions and I left that place feeling 10 feet tall. It was well worth the 25 extra credit points. I once told off a customer in a retail store for being rude and mean. She had made one of my staff cry, she was so awful. The general gist of what I said was, "Do you feel better about yourself after you made this 17-year-old girl cry? Was it really necessary? Until you learn to treat others with respect, I don't want to see you in my store again. Leave before I call security." It's shocking how rude people are, and not just the younger generation. When I was working at Target in high school, I dealt with extremely rude people all the time. Usually I'd just give them the benefit of the doubt and assume they were having a bad day or something, but I've had things thrown at me while I was sitting at the customer service desk, being called a racist, screamed at, you name it. It's awful. I feel for anyone working in that environment. I went off on someone who pushed their shopping cart towards the little corrals, but it ended up going off course and hitting a parked car. They didn't bother to look or put the cart away properly. I also went off on someone who slammed their car door into the parked car next to them, several times, because apparently they parked too close. The lady doing the door slamming was parked over the line, and the vandalized car was dead center of the spot. I took down her license plate number, went into the store, found the owner of the other car, and let them know. What was the biggest fail a new driver has made on their driving test? I was finishing my test, and a man when I went in was yelling at the proctor. Apparently it was unfair that his daughter failed since she can't read English, so she didn't understand what a stop sign meant. Even if you can't read, you should still fricking know what a red octagon on a stick means. I had a driving class in high school that went out in groups to drive. One kid didn't know how to turn off a turn signal. He didn't know that you can flick it off with your hand. After he made the turn, the signal was still on, so he began wildly jerking the wheel left and right, trying to make it stop. My brother taking his driving test. He put his hand on the passenger headrest to brace to look backwards while reversing, and his hand slipped off the rest and slapped the bejesus out of the driving instructor, breaking his glasses and leaving a perfect red handprint on his cheek. He still passed! One of my driving instructor's other students, a 16-year-old girl who went into labor during the driving test, and the examiner had to drive her to the hospital. My driving instructor told me about a previous student who drove directly over a very large mound of grass kind of roundabout. Apparently the examiner wouldn't even let them drive back to the test center, took over the driving for them. My ex failed after the examiner said, "Straight over the roundabout." Well, she drove onto the roundabout and was also failed for not indicating to oncoming traffic when she left the roundabout. My dad was an examiner for a while. Once a girl froze during the test and stopped on railroad tracks, and a train was coming. Not real fast, but fast enough that it might not be able to stop. She wouldn't hit the accelerator as she was frozen in fear, especially after the train blew its horn right into the window. My dad had to put his foot on her side and hit the gas to get off the tracks. And this is one of the reasons why in Germany, the cars for the driving instructors have a gas and brake pedal on the passenger side as well. If the instructor hits one of those during the test, a buzzer goes off, so the examiner in the back knows that the instructor had to intervene. Needless to say, this is an instant fail. Honestly, I thought this system was standard all over the world. Also, we're really just not that much better than those goats that freeze when they hear loud noises, are we? Maybe it works in nature, but it's a real evolutionary flaw in our modern world that we decide to lie perfectly still in exactly the path of this thing that will definitely kill us. My tester told me something I'll never forget. He was driving with a girl and testing her. Here in Arizona, and probably everywhere in the US, the examiner isn't allowed to say anything that isn't a direction, like turn left. Of course, this doesn't work if the driver is a little slow. During the test, she pulls up to a stop sign. She's the first one there, but another car pulls up to the left. She waves them on. Not entirely wrong, but she should have gone first. Not a huge deal, though. Then it happens again. Mind you, she hasn't moved through the intersection. Rather, another car has approached, stopped, and been waved on. There are now 1 or 2 cars behind her. Eventually, there's a huge backup of honking traffic and a small trickle of cars crossing through the intersection in front of her. She finally turns to the instructor and says, "Why are they all mad at me? I have a red light." And that's the story of how a small point deduction failed someone's driving test. Not the examiner, but I was involved. I was driving my regular vehicle into the parking lot of a CDL-only driver facility to renew my CDL. As I was making a right into the parking lot from the public road, a semi-tractor trailer comes flying out of the lot into my right-of-way. I avoid by pulling off onto the grass. The trailer continues onto the road but crosses directly across into the parking lot opposite. I get off the grass, park properly, grab my things and walk into the facility. I was angry, but I wasn't hit, so I wasn't going to go after the guy and cause a fight. About 3 minutes later, a driver examiner walks in screaming about this idiot who's never getting his Class A as long as she lives, and whoever bought him here better not ever let him try again, and needs to go across the street to collect the vehicle and the sorry excuse for a driver. So yeah, I nearly got taken out by a newbie truck driver. I wonder if he ever did pass or if she was truly able to permaban him. Not me, but my driving instructor said a student failed when they forgot to put the car in drive. Did pretty much everything else right, but they were pressing on the gas and were confused as to why they weren't moving. I actually forgot to turn the car on when I first went for my test. I was using my instructor's car and he'd always have it on already when I drove it, so I wasn't prepared, clearly. I still passed, though. I was a new driver. At the time, I read about a new law where drivers could run a stop sign if the driver could see that the intersection was clear. This was considered a rolling stop. I went to my test, drove a stick fluently, rolled through a 4-way stop, and the instructor freaked out. That was a 4-way stop! Well, there's a new law to save gas when you're allowed to roll through a stop if the intersection is clear. It was passed in October. It was clear, so I rolled through. Satisfied, the instructor scribbled something on his clipboard. I passed and went back to work. Told the guys that the dumb instructor didn't even know about the new rolling stop law. My colleagues looked aghast. That's not a law. They proposed it in October, and it got shot down. I can't believe he passed you. Whew! My cousin took a turn too fast in Lake Country and flipped the car completely upside down on his first test. Did he pass, or did he get a driver's permit for Australia? I was T-boned by a lady running a red, and I failed. I mean, if you can't complete the test, they can't exactly pass you, even if it's not your fault. There was a big panic and scrambling on the day of my road test. Apparently, a young woman completely blew past a stop sign and got T-boned by a school bus. The girl was hurt, but since it was the examiner's side, they were in a critical condition last I heard. Safe to say she instantly failed. I mean, if the instructor dies during the test, can you really fail? Technically, the only witness to your driving is dead. In college, I had a fraternity brother who was stopped by the police for suspected drunk driving. The driver got out of the car as the police officer approached the car. It's a big no-no in my state. The driver immediately fell to the ground and passed out. He was arrested and the car was impounded. The fraternity's faculty moderator was an attorney and professor. He represented the driver in court. He was acquitted because he had neither failed the sobriety test or breathalyzer, nor did he refuse to take it. This gem is from my examiner. Said the worst he's ever seen was a girl who thought it would be a good idea to try to outrun a train. He told her to stop, and she said no, she's fine. The barrier hit the top of her car and insta-failed after she bottomed out the suspension while speeding. On my test, I passed pretty easily, and when the instructor told me to pull over at the end of the course, she motioned towards a spot with a fire hydrant. Thinking it was a final gotcha, I said, well, there's a fire hydrant there, so I'll go to the next stop. She didn't care, it wasn't a test, but as soon as I parked 3 cars up, a presumably failing testee rear-ended the car I would have been behind at around 15 kilometers per hour. No one left in an ambulance, but the instructor in that car got out rubbing his neck and the car was pretty beat up. If I didn't think my examiner was tricking me, it would have been my car. I had a friend in high school who ran a red light during her exam. She thought it was a left turn yield, and it was not. She laughed about it later and said the examiner was like, "Why did you do that?" In excess of 25 years ago, the RTA office car park in Albury, New South Wales was where you started your test. There was a stop sign and a solid white line at the exit from the car park. Australian rules make this a compulsory stop. Neophytes would roll through it and thus fail before the front wheels even hit the road. Does an examiner mistake count? Local story, the examiners used to tap the pens on the dashboard to signify when it was time for the emergency stop part of the test. This practice was stopped when, apparently, an examiner absent-mindedly tapped his pen on his clipboard towards the end of one unfortunate soul's test, who misinterpreted this as another emergency stop command. The pen went through the examiner's eye. Where I live, a student drove into the river with her instructor, and both women died. I still don't understand how this could have happened. Well, did she pass? Well, yes and no. Well, the narrator's going to hell for laughing at that last bit, but I'd wager that a few of you others are as well, so I guess I'll see you there. I was at the DMV a few days ago when I overheard a girl crying her eyes out. Apparently there was a pothole in the middle of the road and the examiner told her to go around it using the bike lane since there was no middle lane. She proceeded to do so but drove the rest of the driving test in the bike lane. She was telling her parents it wasn't even her fault because the lady told her to drive in the bike lane. My cousin finished his driving test by driving into the side of the DMV itself, leaving a large hole in the wall. He asked his instructor if he would have passed if he didn't hit the wall, and the instructor just shook his head and failed him. I passed the first time, 100%, although when driving back into the car park of the transport department, I pulled in a little wonkily, so I said, "Oh, I'll fix that for you," reversed back to straighten up, and another car had started to pull out directly behind me, not noticing me, I guess. They were about to hit my car, so I stressed out and put the car into drive to move forward quickly. A little too quickly. I launched my car over the car space barrier thing. I wanted to cry then and there, and he just said, "Okay, I'll meet you inside." I parked the car and sat there for a good minute, knowing that must have made me fail. As I walked inside, I saw all of the instructors standing together with him, and they were all laughing at me. I passed, though, so I was happy to laugh along whilst dying inside. Now I have a real fear of hitting those mini concrete barriers when I park. I almost hit a woman with a stroller during my test. There was a shadow from a building covering her and the stroller and sunlight everywhere else. The examiner was surprised and didn't see her herself, so I passed. Don't ask me how, but my friend drove up an exit ramp. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My brother looped his bike on his motorcycle test. He got nervous and gave it way too much throttle and dumped the clutch at the same time. The bike just started rotating out from under him. I'm not an examiner, but damn, it was funny to watch. I passed my third time. I have no idea how good I did though. The Korean woman who tested me looked pretty tired, put her sunglasses down, told me about 2 instructions, and then promptly began to doze off during the test. At one point she said, "You know where to go." Entirely skipped the freeway portion of my test. I remember pulling in and I said, "Okay, we're here," and she softly muttered, "Thank God." 100% pass, no mistakes. I guarantee she didn't see a single second of my driving. One of my friends made a pretty brutal mistake. We live in Wisconsin and she took the test on a day where there was a bit of snow. Started the road portion of the test, pulling up to a red light with a pedestrian crossing in the crosswalk. My friend started braking way too late. When she hit the brakes, the wheels just locked up and she slid into the pedestrian, knocking them up onto her hood and breaking the pedestrian's leg. She failed 4 times more after that, but now just uses the road like everyone else. I refuse to ever ride in her car. Not awful, but I was definitely embarrassed the whole time. I was nervous on my first test, and when they said, "Start the car and pull onto the road," I turned on the car, then accidentally turned on the windshield wiper fluid and the wipers on full speed and struggled to turn it off. They laughed it off, but I ended up failing anyway. The worst mistake was an examiner giving me a license. I passed with literally the lowest grade. He said he was legally obligated to pass me, but that I shouldn't drive, and he was right. Toward the end of the semester during driver's ed, we were allowed to take the official driving test with our high school instructor, and generally did so in pairs. I went out for my test along with a classmate. I went first and passed my test just fine. My classmate got in the driver's seat, didn't disengage the parking brake, and backed out of the angled parking space the wrong way. This meant immediate failure, and my instructor literally ripped her paper test form thing in half. Felt bad, but it was pretty hilarious. A buddy of mine was born 6 months before me. When we were 13, he bragged continuously about how much sooner he'd have his license compared to me. Anyway, I think he failed his test like 4 times. First time, he bumped the curb. Second time, I don't know, but he lost his crap at the instructor. It was the same guy testing him. And then made a huge scene, then failed 2 more times after that. By the time he got his license, he was only on the road for 2 weeks before me. I failed my written test once and my mock driving school test, but I passed my first road test. My instructor said, "Well, you did great, but there's a spliff in your cup holder, so I'm going to have to ask you to try again another time." "That's not mine." "Hey, listen, I was young once too. Don't worry, you'll pass next time." My mum left her Mary J in the car. Not an examiner, but the day I took my test 17 years ago, I was watching the other tests for tips while waiting in line. One kid just finished his test and hit a parked car pulling back into the lot. I overheard the examiner saying that just because he'd already signed the test form, the wreck was on the teenager's license and not himself. As if teenagers' insurance rates aren't already ridiculously high. In driver's ed, I was on my last observation. The guy got in the car and told the instructor he's colorblind. No big deal, wait for it, and that he couldn't rotate his back or turn his head to look for oncoming traffic or pedestrians or people in the other lane. I guess it was genetic because he seemed fine. He had to turn his entire body to see anything. But the driving instructor was cool with it. They had to do all the looking out for the guy. I was scared though. I bet the one with the best answer is no longer here with us. F. The narrator is hitting F and also paying respects. Yes, it has occurred to me that there's definitely a non-zero number of people who've likely died during their tests, which is a sobering thought. Honestly, being an examiner must be a relatively high-stress job now that I think about it. This happened during my test. I just gotten into a little Hyundai as my first car to take my test in, as my mum drove a massive SUV. We hadn't driven it much or anything, but we decided it would suffice. We had to drive about 45 minutes to the testing facility as we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So here I am, 16, nervous as heck, in this new car that we just got, on roads I don't recognize. My instructor had me drive on an old country road where the speed limit was 55 miles per hour, the fastest I'd ever driven. All was going well until I noticed smoke billowing out of my driver wheel well. My car was on fire. Something had bounced up into my tires and burst into flames. After the whole ordeal was over, the instructor passed me despite not completing the maneuverability part of the exam. The cool thing was that the car was totaled due to the fire, and I ended up getting another, way better, non-exploding vehicle. I managed to stall the car on top of a roundabout. Luckily, it wasn't a proper test, but just my dad with a printout of the assessment rubric. It did mark the end of his attempts to teach me how to drive a manual before an automatic. He then did the sensible thing of teaching me the skills required to drive an automatic, then put me back in the manual to learn how to do that without also having to panic about the driving part. I drove across a 6-lane highway because I assumed they all had a stop sign. My examiner nearly crapped his pants. And no, I didn't pass, but I did the next time. My examiner told the story which I haven't forgotten. I'd gotten docked points for not slowing down enough through an uncontrolled intersection. Fair enough. A couple of months prior, a girl had done that and got T-boned by a pickup truck. Yikes. It's funny how those things make an impression on you. My examiner told me my shoulder check when turning right from a stop was barely adequate and that I slowed down too much when about to exit the highway. I thought I was going to fail, but I didn't. And I've made very careful shoulder checks and been aware of traffic behind me when exiting to this day. This is kind of the opposite. Me as the student, but the driving instructor grabbed my wheel on numerous occasions, and on one occasion she grabbed it and was yelling at me to turn into the left lane, which I was doing. However, I was waiting for the driver to get out of my blind spot, and she kept forcing the wheel left as I fought right, and she only let go once the other driver honked at us. Is a driving instructor ever allowed to grab the wheel? I don't understand. The first time I took my test, we started out with maneuvers. For the life of me, probably due to nerves, I couldn't do a reverse bay park right. After about 4 minutes of watching me struggle, the instructor just said, "Let's leave it, huh?" I did the rest of the test anyway for practice, and apparently I would have passed on that, but I failed before I even left the car park of the test center. Oh, mine was a doozy. Got in, put it in reverse, and backed directly into a truck. No damage, still failed though. My ex-girlfriend was taking the test and was asked to demonstrate hand signals. Used left arm to show left turn, right turn, stop. Examiner then asked her to put the window down and demonstrate again without cramming her arm into the window. We have 3 levels of driving tests in my area, 2 tests in vehicle. My first driving test in a vehicle, I saw one person testing being crashed into by another person being tested. For my second in-vehicle test, the person returning when I arrived was followed by a police car. Not an examiner, but my friend once got into an accident during his driver's test. He got confused about a 4-way stop, stopped in the middle of an intersection, then didn't want to get hit by a car coming at him, so he reversed into the car behind him. Whoops! I honestly did pretty well on my whole test and made it all the way back to the DMV. The final test was pulling into a parking spot. The DMV in my city is part of a strip mall with a restaurant directly to the left of the building with outside seating. There were so many open spots and I chose the parking spot right in front of a group of people eating lunch. I rammed right into a guy in his chair that was sitting a couple of inches from the curb. Failed immediately and the examiner lost their crap on me for a solid 5 minutes on my birthday. I waited till the next month to retake the test in the next town over, as it's less busy on the roads, and I felt like I couldn't show my face at the first DMV. I walked in, gave my name, and immediately the examiner goes, "Oh my gosh, are you the girl who hit someone in their chair?" I was so embarrassed, but thankfully I still passed. I was the examiner, and I was giving this kid his driving test for the second time. We were driving down a 4-lane highway. Now, it's my job to make sure he knows how to safely and properly change lanes. When I looked, this kid had plenty of space. I tell him to change lanes. He swerves over without barely a glance, and at this point a car had come flying up out of nowhere. Well, he changes lanes and the car apparently swerves to avoid him. The next thing I see is a car flying through the air across the 4-laner and landing in someone else's yard from behind us. He panicked and I kind of freaked out too. The driver was okay and the person whose yard it was freaked, but it was okay too. By some miracle, that car managed to not hit another car. Needless to say, the kid didn't pass. Again. I think he took the test 2 more times before he finally got it. Scared the crap out of me. There was also a brother and sister who nearly killed me twice in less than 20 minutes. One pulled out in front of a rollback who barely slammed on the brakes in time to not hit us, but I could count the bugs in the grille. The other turned in front of an 18-wheeler. Good times, good times. This was a high school driving course. Was driving on a back road when my teacher said, "What are you doing?" in the calmest voice. I said, "What do you mean?" Turns out my dumb butt was driving on the wrong side of the road for like a whole minute. Luckily, the road was empty, or else that conversation would have ended a lot differently. Funnily enough, I still got my permit at the end of the course. My cousin's girlfriend at the time thought that you could make a left turn on a red if clear. Needless to say, she immediately failed, and the guy was so freaked out he drove back to the DMV for her. How did you talk your way out of getting killed? I'm 19. First time in Europe, started in Italy visiting relatives, and on the first night I went out for a walk. A group of guys looking like trouble pushed me around and then showed me their switchblades, demanding money, which I seemed to obviously have since I stood out as a foreigner by my clothes. Except all I had on me was 20 euros and a Johnny, because I was so naive from hearing how easy it was to get tail in Europe, I was expecting local girls to just see me and approach me to get busy. And I explained as such to these guys in my broken 1960s Italian gleaned from my parents. They laughed their butts off and wished me luck. Cousin with mental health issues threw a table at me but missed. He grabbed the leg and put me to the ground and shouted, "I'm gonna frickin' kill you, smash your skull." And I responded with, "If you're gonna do that, let's not do it in front of our family." It worked. I was babysitting for my cousins, aged 5 and 3. I was 14 at the time. The 5-year-old found his dad's gat and was waving it around like a toy. He was pointing it at things and pretending to blast them, not putting his finger on the trigger, thankfully. At one point, he pointed it at me and pretended to be a bank robber. I told him if he handed me the piece, he'd get the package of Oreos on the counter and we could all have some. It actually worked, and I stuck the weapon on a high shelf until my aunt and uncle came home. As it turned out, it was loaded. My aunt made my uncle buy a safe and put all the weapons in the garage after that. In short, for the love of God, don't leave your pieces where your young children can find them. No matter how much you tell them it's not a toy, they'll still treat it like a toy. Whoa, just wait a minute. That's what I said to the guy who'd just slammed me face first into an ATM and drew a blade on me as I staggered to my feet. I kicked him and ran out of the bank's vestibule. By the way, he went to prison. Thanks, ADA Heinrich. I talked my way out of getting shanked when I was being robbed. I don't know if he would have murdered me, but he definitely would have messed me up. I told him to chill and put the knife away and he could have whatever the frick he wanted. So he put his knife away and went through my crap while I just stood there annoyed. I went for breakfast with the girl right afterwards and carried on with my day. My brother was attacked in our house by a guy with a knife. My brother didn't know the guy had a blade when he put the guy in a headlock. When he whistled for Dad, the guy dropped the knife and covered his ears. By the way, my brother can whistle at about 120 decibels, louder if he's angry. So my brother pulled the guy's hand off his ear, put his mouth to the guy's ear, and just whistled as loud as he could 4 or 5 times. When my dad got to them and threw the guy out the door, he couldn't even stand up straight as his equilibrium had been completely thrown off. He's probably still deaf. Good God, your brother has a whistle with more percussive force than a shout? Honestly, I know I should be focusing on the life-death angle, but this is insane. He flashbanged someone just with the force of the air coming out of his mouth. That's some X-Men crap. I was accosted by a young kid with a Glock. He couldn't have been more than 13. I can't remember the exact conversation, but basically he looked at me and said, "Give me everything you have and I'll let you go." I wanted to freak out, but something in me said to remain calm. I said something like, "Is that a real piece or an airsoft?" And he pulled out the clip. Sure enough, it was real, surprisingly. I said, "Look kid, I don't have anything but $5 in this crappy phone that isn't really going to get you anything. Is this really worth life in prison if you shoot me?" He looked at me, looked at his weapon, started crying, turned around and walked away. I did call the police and alert them that there was a kid walking around 14th Street brandishing a weapon, but by the time they got to where I was, the kid was long gone. I told the cops what direction he'd gone in and what he looked like and all that stuff, but I'm not sure if anything came of it. I'm not entirely sure how close I was to being murdered. This took place back when I worked the register at McDonald's. I was around 10, we weren't 24-hour and we'd be closing soon. In walks a guy that's drunk off his butt. He comes up to the counter and starts chatting with me about nothing in particular, mostly nonsense I can't remember. But I started to get the impression he wasn't just drunk. I was doing my best to just humor him, waiting for him to leave, when out of nowhere he says, "If I was gonna kill everyone in here, I'd kill you first, because you look like you'd know what to do." A bit of a morbid joke, I thought, and I said, thanks? At this point, he pulled out a piece from his waistband and pointed it at me. It wasn't like a full-on point, more like he was limply holding the weapon in my general direction. I didn't know what to do and only hoped to God he was still joking. He then said, "Bang," and tucked the gun back into his waistband. I think he just wanted to let me know he could kill me if he wanted to. He left shortly after that. I informed my manager and was later told that that man was both a regular and longtime friend of his, and he tried to downplay what had happened. I left that job shortly after for school. When I was 22, I had a 9mm put in my face because I was drunk and probably hit on this guy's girlfriend. I apologized and told him he was a lucky guy. I don't know how that worked. It was my sister's 21st birthday, and the whole family and a couple of my sister's friends decided to let's all go out to a bar. We went 3 cars deep to this small bar. Night starts off fine, everyone's dancing and drinking, then this group of 15 people came in, and as soon as they walk in, they started bumping into people, leering at these girls and challenging their boyfriends to do something. I tell my girl we gotta watch out for these buttholes, so we stay clear of them until the end of the night. Me and my girl kept to ourselves, just watching everyone, and we see these jerks surrounding my sister's friend, so I go and pull him away from the situation and ask what happened. He just complimented the guys on their hats because we're 49ers fans. So the guys leave. We head out about 20 minutes later, I grab my sister and her 2 friends and we head to the car. As we're walking to the car, I see 3 guys from this same group walk towards my car from the other side of the parking lot. I tell everyone to get in the car, and my girl is forcing my sisters and her friends inside while I approach these guys. I say, "What's good?" They answer, "What's up, homie? You guys got a problem?" "Nah, whatever happened inside, just leave it inside. It's my sister's birthday. We're not trying to have any crap go down. We good?" I should have known some crap was about to go down. One of them was holding his shirt over his face, and the other had his hat down real low and was holding his waist. But the main guy looks at them and said, "Yeah, we're good." And I shake his hand and then the other guy's hand, but then the guy with his hat real low won't shake my hand and won't take his hand off his waist, so I say, "Your boy says we're cool. We don't want no problems." At this moment, my uncle and my best friend come around the corner and start yelling, "Yo, hey!" And that's when it happened. All 3 guys pulled out gats and started shooting in the air and then shot towards my uncle and best friend. Everyone starts screaming, but I didn't flinch. It was really weird. I just looked around and one of the guys says, "What about him?" and looks right at me and just says, "Ah, frick it." And they just ran back to their cars. I walk to my car and drive down to where my uncle and friend were, stop the car and just hear my mum and aunt screaming that my uncle's been shot. The cops came. I spent the next 2 hours talking to them about what had happened, what they looked like, stuff like that. Found out why they approached us later that night. Apparently, while my sisters, uncles, and friends were outside smoking, these guys came outside to smoke, and while smoking, said some racist crap to our friends, and they ended up pushing and shoving, and my sister decked one of them. They found the guys later, and we testified against them. They're each serving between 15 to 20 years. My uncle was really lucky they shot him in the back, and they missed all of his organs. I found out later, before they left the bar, they were in the bathroom snorting crystal, and that they were planning on just walking up to the car and unloading their weapons. I almost got knifed in the Dominican Republic by these 2 kids in this tiny town by AITA. They saw me walking around at night and came to my hotel with knives. I was out on the balcony in front of my room, and they came up to me not saying a word but brandishing a large enough knife. So I put my hands up and real cool-like reached into my pocket and handed them like 200 in the local currency, and they ran off. The kicker is that my wife was in an unlocked room right there with like maybe 25 grand and all of our stuff. And I made enough noise about it talking calmly, but loudly enough that I heard the door lock, thank God. My first thought was, they want money. My second was, what if they get in that room with my wife? That second question still haunts me. Anyway, so this town is small, and I walk over to the cop station and explain what happened, and the cops are like, "Oh yeah, we probably know who it is. Come back tomorrow morning at 9 and we'll have you identify them." I came back at 9 and they had both of them in custody. Never did get my money back, but whatever. Wonder how much cash those cops got. It could be none, but this might be a weird stopgap measure to make tourists feel like justice has been served and maybe make some money on the side still. Granted, the conversation was pretty one-sided, but here we go. My wife and I were in a parking lot at a Walmart. The guy wanted the car and had a knife, but I had a 9mm. It didn't happen to me, but my dad was getting gas in a particularly sketchy part of town that he wasn't usually in. A man approached my dad as he was filling his gas tank, points a weapon at my dad and shouts, "Give me your wallet!" Instead, my dad pulls the gas nozzle out of his truck and sprays the guy. At the time, my dad smoked and pulled out his Zippo lighter and began to strike it. The best part is that the robber called the cops on my dad for trying to light him on fire. In the end, my dad got away with nothing, and the other guy got hauled away in a cop car. My friend's mother was bringing in the groceries. As she was walking the bags up the stairs, she turned to find a man who'd snuck into the garage after her car, pointing a rifle at her. "Shh," she said with a finger to her lips. "You have to get out of here. You're going to be in big trouble." He looked around, panicked, and ran. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad was about 25 at the time, probably 35 years ago now. He lived in a bad neighborhood, and after getting a packet of cigs from a 7-Eleven, he was sitting in his car for a second and a young guy came up to the window with a gat. To my dad, he said, "Give me all your money or I'll kill you right here, right now." Dad said, "Look, I have $30, and frankly, that frickin' money is mine. You're gonna have to kill me for it. Is it worth the blood of a human and most likely life in prison for $30 fricking dollars?" He said the guy had this sort of, well, whatever, attitude about it, and gave him a goodbye tap on his car like he just came up to say hello, and walked away. He said the guy was real casual about it, oddly so. He didn't sleep well for a few months after that experience. I was walking home from work at a pizza place. Two guys approached me wielding knives. I'm wearing headphones, so I can't hear what they said, but I assume it had to do with them taking my stuff. I threw my pizza box at the first guy frisbee style, threw my drink at the second guy normal style, and took off running. Didn't talk my way out except for the "oh frick" when I realized what was happening, but it was still crazy. I don't know if this counts, but I was alone by a lake one evening a few years ago. Insects were humming around, their wings glistening in the fading sunlight, and fish swam near my feet. It was super chill, and I've rarely felt more peaceful. Until someone moved in the bushes. Now, normally, I would have ignored this. People came and went from this spot fairly frequently. It was a popular makeout spot. But something felt off this time. The person was taking too long, like they were trying to be quiet. I thought maybe it was a couple messing around, so I got to my feet and started to leave. As I turned to the exit, a man stepped from the bushes. He had a metal rod in one hand and a cord in the other. My first thought was he was just collecting trash. But a second later, before I could even register why, I was suddenly viscerally angry. I wanted to hurt this man more than I've ever wanted to hurt anyone before. I think he saw the crazy in my eyes or something though, because he hesitated and forced this weird smile. I was unarmed, but I slowly reached around my back like I was putting my hand on a weapon, and he moved back into the bushes. A few moments later, he re-emerged empty-handed and asked how the fish were today. I said good, flashed a smile, and left. In short, I crazy-vibed a suspicious stranger into small talk. He might have only been there to spearfish, looking back on it. Nearly being murdered is maybe a bit of an over-exaggeration, but I was surrounded by 10 skinheads with baseball bats once. They were known to sometimes just beat the crap out of people for fun. But I was drunk as frick, so I just laughed all the time while they did stupid stuff like pushing me. Then they'd had their fun and they let me get into my taxi without beating me up with their baseball bats. This isn't actually my story, but my boyfriend's. Some men broke into his childhood home while he, his brother and mother were all there and made them get on the ground asking where someone was. Turns out the neighbor was a substance dealer and they got the house wrong. They threatened his family but then figured out they were in the wrong house and left, stealing the house's wireless landline. Oddly enough, they didn't take the cell phones. I don't know if this guy wanted to murder us, but he was definitely up to no good. My mum and I were just walking somewhere. I don't remember to where, I was much younger, but it was in the south of France somewhere. There was this guy who came around the corner and got in our way, telling us he had a shooter in his pocket, which was probably BS, and that we needed to give him everything to pass. My mum grew up in Paris and walked through shady parts when she was younger, and knows how to react, so she just straight up told him no thanks and slapped his shoulder a little bit to push him out of the way, and we went by him. Yeah, in my time I've heard a few stories about people getting out of sticky situations this way, just by saying no and basically brushing them off. I've got to say, it is a play, and I don't know if I can recommend it. It probably relies a lot on how confident your assailant is, and that's a real random factor. One time, my mother was driving to Tanzania with my uncle while she was pregnant with me. It was early in the afternoon, so she was extremely shocked to find a bunch of armed robbers waiting on the side of the road, like a bunch of hyenas waiting for their prey to come to them. They started waving their weapons around, telling my uncle and mother to come out of the car. I believe that they had the intention to kill. However, this is where it gets interesting. The leader of that gang took one look at my mother's belly, saw that it had a bump, and simply let them leave. My mother tells me that when the leader saw that she was pregnant, his eyes filled with remorse. Maybe he had been a former father as well. Anyway, they took my uncle's wallet and bade us goodbye. To this day, I keep on telling my uncle that I saved his life. I am a motorcycle rider. Just over a year ago, I purchased my Senna 20S, and at the time it met all of my expectations. Great sound quality for music, clear calls, and contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that one day it would save my life. On February 28, 2016, around 9:30 p.m., I came home from a ride. I got off my bike in the driveway where I was met by a man with a sidearm who had broken into my home. He demanded that I enter the house, and as I approached the door, threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold, I was forced to the ground and my hands and feet were bound with phone cord. The intruder resumed his vicious ransacking of my house while I lay there in my helmet, wondering what was going to happen to me when he was done. Sometime later, my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten, and then bound in a separate room from myself. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, sidearm, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations while kicking my roommate. He began speaking irrationally about how he was looking for kiddie smut and rifles, how someone sent him to our house months earlier and he'd been watching the house for a couple of days. He was going to hold us for about 2 days while he cleaned up his fingerprints and burned part of the house to get rid of any DNA. He'd then drive us to the middle of nowhere and leave us for dead. While he was spending time in the back room attempting to break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my sonar on. The moment the sonar said, "phone connected," I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe granted me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the sonar. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who it ended up calling, I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who's 3 hours ahead on the Eastern time zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered, 911. 911, 911. He eventually replied back to me, 911, confirming he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering my address, at which point the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What's that noise?" I told him, "It's just the radio playing in the helmet and I can't turn it off." He proceeded to take the hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the sonar. He grabbed the remains and threw them in the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly from my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with a hammer and threw it on the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on the ground from the scuffle, and they called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbound me and instructed me to answer the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up, and approached the front door. The police were shouting, "Local police department, open the door," over and over again, and my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We're in here!" repeatedly. The intruder ran to the other room to silence him. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling, "Hostage!" with my hands up, hoping that no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, behind me the intruder slammed the door. The police quickly withdrew back into the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street, barely able to keep my footing as we moved, dragged through the front lawn and placed on the back of a squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up but safe. The intruder ended up escaping out the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window of time. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect has been found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house. Okay, June 2017. After a year of bullcrapping the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and the state psych hospital saying he's fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to prison for 26 years. In short, guy broke in, I was held hostage with threats to kill me, my roommate came home and the intruder attempted to discharge a weapon, but the safety was still on. Called 911 from Bluetooth in my motorcycle helmet. The guy got away for a time. I don't know if this guy was going to murder us, but it was super sketchy. My mum and I were walking back from a baseball game one summer after I got back from college. My mum had had a few, so I was driving. On the way back, some sketchy dude started following us. I took a turn towards our car in the parking lot and he started muttering things. I told him to go away, but he ignored me. I gave my mum my shirt that I got at the game and told her to run to the car. The guy then lunged at me after she took off, so I body slammed him and he landed on his butt. I ran to the car, locked it, and we flew out of there. That was a scary yet exhilarating moment, and we just drove home after that. I live near a pretty bad city, so things like this are expected, so we saw no point in calling the police or the stadium security, but it was frightening nonetheless. What are some dark mind tricks that actually work for manipulators? Silence. If you want to know something, ask the question and then just wait. People want to fill the silence and will talk and talk. The best way to get the right answer is to propose a wrong one. They call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you want to be an effective liar, build a reputation for being honest. The more you're known as being reliable, the easier it is to deceive and manipulate. It's not terribly complex, I know. I acted like I couldn't lie because of this trick, and now I actually can't lie. Crap, I went in too deep. One that I've found effective when someone's being rude to you is to stay completely silent and stare at them. It'll make them feel incredibly uncomfortable and they'll usually act civilly after a few moments. As a disclaimer, don't do this to people who are exhibiting aggressive behavior or whilst in an unsafe, non-public environment. That won't work on the local thug in the street and will likely cause you harm. This is a tactic meant to be used on otherwise mature adults in a safe environment. Staring at people's foreheads irritates them quite a lot. If you talk good behind people's backs, it'll get them, trust me. It'll get to everyone. I do this all the time. Just wait till those chumps find out that I actually like them and genuinely wish them well. One thing that my dad does, he might be completely unaware of it, is when you give him good news, he always exaggerates it back to you, thus forcing you to downplay your own accomplishment. I honestly don't think he's consciously doing it. It drives me absolutely crazy. Like, hey, I've got amazing news. I got promoted to vice president. Wow, that's great. So senior vice president. No, just vice president. Oh, well, that's still pretty good, I guess. And now the wind is out of my sails. If you make a favor seem bigger than it is before asking it, the person on the receiving end is much more likely to help. Huh, anyone else feel like they've probably been hoodwinked by this one at least once in their life? Seriously, I might have done stuff I would never do otherwise just because I was anticipating being asked to do something much worse. You got me, guys. Change the perspective from I to we, and people will automatically align themselves with you. I'm a teacher, and this is how I get my students to go along with completing tasks that they don't necessarily find fun. For example, okay, it's home time, we need to clean up the class, or we need to complete this section of reading before we can move on to our next activity. It makes it always seem like a team effort. If someone doesn't want to give you specific information like tuition costs or hours expected, give them an example that's completely unreasonable. They'll usually immediately give you an exact number and feel embarrassed for pretending not to know. So I'll say, so how much does your C++ course cost? And they'll say, it really depends on what your goals are. Don't you have a beginner's course? Can you give me a price range? We can work with you to fit your individual needs. Okay, so is it like $10 for access to all your courses, or oh no, we have a subscription for $99 a month. Or you can buy the beginner's course for $120. Not useful very often, but it works every time. People start to believe something if they're told it over and over and over, even if it goes against everything they know. That's why the news is so important to pretty much every government on Earth. They get to decide what we hear over and over. Just putting it out there that if you familiarize yourself with a lot of the things that are said here, you can more easily guard yourself from others who can attempt to use them on you. Mirroring is incredible. If you can pull it off from a simple swinging of a chair or a gentle smile, you can actually control their presence. I did some anti-mirroring to a salesman at my door once. I leaned against my door frame, he leaned against my porch post. As soon as he did it, I stood up straight. He stood up straight. I leaned against my door frame again. Rinse and repeat for about a minute. He lost his train of thought, got nervous, and said he had to go. It was kind of funny. If you say something often enough, people will start to believe it after a while. And once a couple more people are saying it, it will exponentially explode through whatever population is listening. The wording of the questions often influences the answer. For example, when asked the question, How fast were the cars going when they crashed? People give, on average, an estimated speed that's faster than when the question is formulated as, at what velocity were the cars going when they collided? The first question also gives a bias in that fast implies high speed, so will likely garner an inflated figure. I have a fun one. Working in retail, I've learned that if you hand someone something while they're talking, they'll take it, put it in their pocket or purse or whatever, and then have no recollection of you ever having given them it. It's worked on every person I've tried it with. And no, I didn't make anyone shoplift, it's usually their receipts, pens, or the credit card slips. Then after them talking, they'll ask for it and I'll tell them they pocketed it. But I learned this is a real psychological trick and also to wait until they're done talking to hand them something. I have a coworker who annoys the crap out of me by taking up my time talking. I'm a welder and I fit parts for other welders to finish, so there are people waiting for me to do my job, so any time spent talking slows everyone down. When he starts talking to me while I'm busy, I ask him a question, then hand him some trash like an empty soda can or a print or something. Then I start walking back to his work area. When we get there and walk in, as soon as he takes a breath or pauses, I say, "Oh, hey, let me throw that out for you." I take the trash back and walk out of his area. He never follows and he thinks I'm super helpful and friendly. People want to be acknowledged, accepted, and appreciated. It takes almost nothing to give them that, but empires have risen and fell because of it. People will be so happy that you've given it, even if they know they're being manipulated. They'll ignore the manipulation for the sake of what you're giving them. When walking in a crowded area, look where you're going and not at the other people. They'll naturally move out of your line of sight, making it quicker to move around. If you want someone to like you, ask them to do small favors for you and be very appreciative when they comply. Positive reinforcements for tasks, just like training a dog. The book you want is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That crap works. Don't overuse it, though. Sunk cost. Basically, any time or effort or money that's already been expended or spent tends to be factored into decision-making, even though it shouldn't. When I met my wife, she'd always finish her drinks, even if she didn't like them, because she paid for them. I asked her, if you've already paid for them, then the money's already gone. Why suffer through a drink you don't like if there's literally no change in outcome, as opposed to not drinking it? Except not enjoying it. This is why buying a car takes so long. You spent so much time already that you almost feel like you have to buy it. You've invested time and you need to get something for that investment. And oh my gosh, I do not want to go through this again. Waiting several seconds or up to a minute to say something after someone has given you an offer or asked you for something that will make what you say next highly likely to be agreed with. Most people hate uncomfortable silence, especially salespeople. Every mistake I make at work, I go out of my way to admitting to. For some reason, that makes me more trustworthy. I do the same, and I also go out of my way to sing the praises of anyone who's helped me. Makes people want to work with you, and why not? That's who I want to work with. Be honest, don't throw people under the bus, and telegraph your thank yous, and you can ask for plenty of favors. I don't know how dark this one is. It kind of butts right up against just being honest and following the very actually good practice of giving credit where it's due. I mean, unless you're using them exclusively to hoard goodwill so you can cash it in for favors later, or avoid blame for something when you finally do lie. If that's the case, you're just a long-con bad person with strange priorities. My boss likes having meetings after 5 p.m, and even though I technically can be there for it, I don't want to be. So, I tell him I have an important class I'm going to at exactly 5:45, I show up for about 5 to 10 minutes of the meeting, and then I leave. He thinks I'm an amazing team player for going out of my way to hop on for just a few minutes, when in reality I have no class to attend and I hate those meetings. Don't react when someone is getting unnecessarily angry. It drives them crazy. Having a heated argument, ask the other person if they're okay because they're breathing really hard. They'll stop arguing and try to pay attention to their breathing, resulting in the end of that discussion. People will be more favorable to your idea if they think it's their idea. In a competitive environment, if you notice that your opponent is a beginner or showing signs of anxiety, ask them, "Are you nervous?" while trying to act as nonchalant as possible. I'll even yawn if I can. This always gets in people's heads at Street Fighter if they aren't mentally strong to begin with. I was a gymnast in college. When the younger hotshots were warming up for competition, just before warm-ups end and it all gets real, one of us would say, "Wow, that's a great trick. One question, when you're doing that insane maneuver on the apparatus, when do you breathe?" It screws them up every time. When someone says the correct answer, ask, "Are you sure?" and watch the self-doubt rip their soul out. Former schoolteacher here. giving the wrong answer online to get the correct one. Also, the Kubrick stare, with the head forward just a little bit, really makes people leave you the frick alone. Certified hypnotist here. You wanted dark, so here you go. Leading the topic by stating something you know the subject will agree with, transitioning into a restatement of whatever it is they agreed with and altering it slightly, ending with a rhetorical question leaning towards agreement. Like, isn't that right? If you're patient, slow, and careful about this, you can get people to concede or agree to nearly anything without even noticing. Number 2, and this one is incredibly frickin' simple, consistently thank everyone for very, very basic things you might not even think to thank someone for. Think moving out of the way for you, or handing you a water bottle from a few feet away. Once you make the interaction consistent enough, they will be used enough to the praise that it will be missed. Then don't thank them for 1 or 2 things, and they'll very frequently go out of their way in order to earn your thanks again. All of these answers are what are taught in sales technique seminars. The next time you get in an elevator, face towards the rear the whole ride. It freaks the other people out and it makes me laugh. It's the same principle behind stopping on the sidewalk and staring up. Sooner or later, someone else is going to stop and look to see what you're gawking at. If you want to extract agreement from someone you know reasonably well, begin the conversation by talking about occasions in the past when you've cooperated to achieve a common goal. 1 or 2 examples is enough. This primes them to go along with your current proposal. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The power of suggestion is incredibly potent. Most people understand how this tool can affect others. For example, I had a sociology class in high school, it was that or health, and we had to build and conduct a psychology and sociology experiment and write a report on our findings. We were in groups of 4. We had free rein to do what we wanted, but it couldn't be immoral or unethical, but being the group of antisocial, rebellious teens we were, we decided to do an experiment on a suggestion. It was relatively simple. We picked 3 subjects and chose a positive and negative suggestion, and the third was our control. Now, we picked 3 people, 1 popular, 1 not so popular, and someone in the middle, the control. These subjects were picked up, so each one of the group members would have an interaction every class period for 1 whole day. For the popular girl, subject A, we decided to simply ask her if she was feeling alright because she looked pale. Unpopular male, subject B, was asked why they didn't speak up more in class and they should do it. We chose suggestions that would be counter to their personalities. Control, or subject C, was simply asked how their day was going. By the end of the experiment, subject A had gone home sick after 3 class periods. Subject B had an overall increase in participation that lasted several days after the conclusion of the test, and Subject C showed baseline behavior. Now, we did get into trouble because what we did was unethical, but the teacher was so impressed with our report that he let us slide and made us apologize to the participants. If you want to emphasize a point, no matter how small, change your vocabulary. For example, instead of saying, "I've been doing that for 8 years," say, "I've been doing this for almost a decade." All of these answers are giving me trust issues. Asking someone to do you a favor makes them like you more. It seems wrong on the surface, but it's shown to be true. So ask your boss for small personal favors every now and again. Also, if you want someone who has no opinion of you to think well of you, you can try this psychotic move. Act rude towards them. Not overtly, just some small transgressions. Then seek them out the next day and apologize for your behavior, stating that you had a bad day and later regretted whatever you did. Now that they know you, wave high when you see them. They'll end up with a positive opinion of you. The narrator would like to thank all of the psychopaths and actual psychologists who wrote in with contributions to this video on ways to look at other people as puppets to be controlled. This has been fascinating. I hope none of you viewing it use this for evil. If someone's incorrect, like you know 100% they are, but the correction would have little or no bearing on the conversation or argument, just keep it to yourself. It's not worth embarrassing or belittling them and halting the conversation. I'm looking at you, mother-in-law. This is some very good advice. I've been the know-it-all for most of my life. It hasn't gotten me anything positive. It doesn't impress people, doesn't even make you seem smart most of the time. It just makes you look like a negative person who combats everything people say. Plus, like you mentioned, it usually disturbs the conversation instead of adding anything to it. When it's actually necessary to correct someone, people will take it less seriously because you're always dramatic about everything. Don't be like me. Being quiet to allow other people more space to speak. When someone gives a brief answer, instead of responding, be quiet and see if they expound further. If they're going to say more, they will within 5 to 10 seconds. Whenever I want to help someone with something but I know their pride gets in the way or they don't want to impose, I ask them a favor first even if I don't really need it. Examples would be like asking a peer how they arrived at a solution for XYZ, and then repaying the favor by going, "You want to see something cool I learned recently?" and showing them how to do something more efficiently or correctly. Or when you know your parents' heater is broken but they insist on calling a repairman instead of troubling you, and you suddenly need to borrow sugar, but while you're over there you might as well check out that heater. People like to feel helpful and I like to give unsolicited advice. It works out. Not so dark, but humans have predictable patterns when choosing stuff at random. If you ask 100 people to pick a random number between 1 and 10, a great deal of people choose 3 or 7. Even numbers, highest or lowest, 1 and 10, and the middle number, 5, don't feel random enough. So when I play board games like Catan, or card games where others have to pick a random card out of my hand, I always put my most valuable card on either side, not in the middle, since the middle feels more random. If you answer any insult coming from a 12-year-old boy with, "Your mum," they'll get insecure. I used to lead people to the bathroom, telling them I've got to go to get them out of my office, and then if they follow me into the bathroom, I'd go into the stall and pretend to go number 2. People love talking about themselves. Ask questions about their personal lives. Act interested in everything they say. I've carried on entire working relationships with people who couldn't tell you anything about me beyond my physical appearance, or incorrectly assumed that I had their exact same interests and opinions. After you get to that point, they're not really sharing information with a stranger as much as with a psychological extension of themselves. 95% of a lie is the truth. Ask someone to draw you a picture in 10 to 15 seconds. Most of the time, they'll draw a house. Wrong. The most common quick drawing subject is actually a face. Actually, I have a few that are going to change your life. If someone's standing too close to you on public transport, all you have to do is throw a handful of dried lentils. They'll be focused on collecting the valuable food and will move away. Works every time. If you see someone attractive at a party or some other event where courtship is appropriate and they're not quite noticing you, here's a good trick to employ. When they're not looking, put a handful of dried lentils in their drink. When they notice and start looking around, make sure you're able to make eye contact, then wink at them so they know it's you. They'll be grateful for the valuable food and will immediately know that you're one piping hot piece of slam meat. The last one's a little risky, so proceed with caution. Earlier today, my boss was being quite disrespectful, but not in an overt way. It was more of a subtle but deliberate undermining, careful to only be noticeable to me. This is something they've been doing consistently for quite some time now, and it's had a negative effect on my reputation and working relationships. So, here's what I did. This can be applied to similar situations, but again, please use good judgment. I threw a handful of dried lentils in their face as hard as I could. They were absolutely furious and started shouting at me, bringing out their true nature for everyone to see. I just filed a complaint with HR, and I'm laughing all the way to the bank. I used to work at a chain bookstore, and part of the job was getting all the books people took off the shelves, took to another part of the store to flip through and then left, and then put them back in their proper spot. It was a lot of work I didn't want to do. I'd get the pile, go talk to a coworker, keep eye contact, but hold out the pile of books to them while talking. Whoever I was talking to took the pile. Every time. I'd walk away before they noticed they had them. Being over-the-top friendly usually counteracts aggressive behavior. I used to have this customer who was always super rude and verbally aggressive on the phone. I started being extremely friendly to her the second I picked it up. She just didn't have the chance to be rude to me. Doesn't work with everyone though. The smarter they are, the faster they're onto you. But it's usually the dumbest people who are the most aggressive to customer support anyway. Another tip is to always be friendly to customer support. I did support for a long time. Guess which customers got the fastest help? Or got helped with problems that technically were their own to solve, but I helped them anyway, or at the very least sent them in the right direction, or sent them a link to the correct page in the online manual. Guess which customers paid for every single second they were on the phone, plus the time it took me to register that time, and which ones I didn't even bill if it was just a 5-minute phone call. Friendliness pays off in a lot of ways, short-term and long-term, even if you're faking it most of the time. Yep. Treat customer service well whenever you can afford to. It can sometimes pay dividends, folks. If you don't feel like talking to someone, let them talk while listening and slowly just look away and avoid eye contact while doing a small task, and don't acknowledge anything they're saying after a bit. I do this on accident because of ADHD, but I noticed it one day as the person walked away mid-sentence, and now I use it when I'm overwhelmed and just want to be left alone. Please know I was still listening to them, I just kinda zoned out. Self-depreciating humor will win people over. You can't go too far, it can be depressing. But if you show you don't have a huge ego and you can take a joke, most people will be prone to like you. It works on the lower rungs for relatability, but I reckon it's perceived as weakness if you employ it at the top of the food chain. That said, not everyone who happens to be situated at the top of the food chain is actually top dog, so know your audience guideline applies. Not exactly dark, but if you touch someone, they're just your friend now. Works like 9 out of 10 times, and when I say touch, I mean appropriately, like touching someone on the arm when you express emotion, like, oh, that's great, or oh, that's too bad. Does anyone here notice that most of these tips require interpersonal presence? Most of our communication is non-verbal. Written communication, by its nature, is more difficult to hack. With written communication, you can still directly focus and praise people's qualities. Use phrases like, thank you for your patience, instead of apologizing, sorry, I'll fix it later. It removes the blame from you and makes the other person feel better. If you don't think about it, your brain will eventually use that as a coping mechanism, and you'll never remember anything ever to prevent from getting traumatized anymore. One time I was volunteering at a shelter, and this guy was creeping on me and wouldn't leave me alone. My female co-volunteer and I kept telling him to go away and that he was making us uncomfortable. I finally just smiled and said, bye, and waved. He finally walked away. So if someone's talking to you and you don't really want to talk to them, I guess instead of giving out commands, just say cordially and confidently, bye or have a nice day, like you're assuming they're leaving, and they'll likely feel compelled to walk away. It's worked on bullies in the past, too. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.